In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there exist realms where the fundamental nature of reality has been so thoroughly corrupted that they can no longer be considered part of the material universe. These are the Daemon Worlds, planets where the barrier between the materium and the immaterium has collapsed entirely, allowing the raw stuff of chaos to bleed through and remake entire worlds according to the twisted desires of the ruinous powers. Unlike the countless billions of worlds that suffer under the yoke of chaos cults or serve as fortress worlds for the traitor legions, Daemon Worlds represent something far more profound and terrifying: the complete dissolution of the natural order itself. The transformation of a world into a demon world begins with the fundamental corruption of real space itself. The warp, that roiling ocean of psychic energy and emotion that underlies all reality, normally exists in a state of separation from the physical universe. This barrier, maintained by the natural laws of physics and the stability of space-time, serves as the only thing preventing the chaotic energies of the immaterium from consuming the galaxy entirely. On Daemon Worlds, this barrier has been utterly destroyed, allowing warp energy to flow freely into real space and remake it according to the whims of the entities that dwell within the Sea of Souls. The process by which this barrier dissolves is neither quick nor simple. It requires catastrophic levels of psychic trauma, often sustained over centuries or millennia, to weaken the fabric of reality sufficiently for the warp to break through. The most common catalyst for this transformation is prolonged and intensive chaos worship, where entire populations dedicate themselves so completely to the ruinous powers that their collective psychic emanations create a resonance with the warp. As millions of souls cry out in devotion to Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, or Slaanesh, their combined psychic energy begins to eat away at the boundary between dimensions like acid-dissolving metal. The planet Sikaris, homeworld of the Word-Bearer's Legion, exemplifies this gradual corruption through worship. For 10,000 years, the Traitor Legion has conducted endless rituals and ceremonies dedicated to chaos undivided, their prayers and sacrifices creating a psychic maelstrom that has fundamentally altered the world's nature. The planet's surface now bears the marks of demonic influence in every stone and grain of sand, with temples that defy architectural logic and statues that weep blood under the light of a sun that burns with unholy fire. Massive psychic trauma represents another pathway to demonic transformation. When populations suffer on a scale that defies comprehension, through genocide, planetary bombardment, or exposure to psychic horrors, the collective anguish and terror of billions can tear holes in reality itself. The planet Medrengard, fortress world of the Iron Warriors, became a demon world not through worship, but through the systematic torture and suffering inflicted upon the slave populations used to build its vast fortifications. The screams of the dying and the despair of the enslaved created such a concentration of negative psychic energy that demons began manifesting spontaneously across the world's surface. Catastrophic warp storms present perhaps the most dramatic method of transformation. These cosmic tempests, born from the deepest reaches of the immaterium, can engulf entire star systems and subject them to raw chaos energy for decades or centuries at a time. Worlds caught within such storms experience reality break down on a fundamental level, as the laws of physics become suggestions rather than absolutes. Time flows backward, gravity reverses itself without warning, and the dead rise to walk among the living as the boundary between possible and impossible ceases to exist. The Eye of Terror stands as the most notorious example of this phenomenon on a galactic scale. This massive warp storm, born from the psychic catastrophe of the fall of the Eldar, has consumed thousands of worlds and transformed them into realms where demon princes rule over landscapes of living flesh and cities built from crystallized screams. Within the Eye, entire planets have been reshaped into forms that serve as monuments to the ruinous powers, worlds where every mountain peak forms the shape of Khorne's skull rune, or where the continents themselves spell out blasphemous prayers to Tzeentch in languages that predate human civilization. Once the transformation begins, the malleable nature of reality on Daemon Worlds becomes immediately apparent. The fundamental constants that govern the material universe, gravity, thermodynamics, causality itself, becomes subject to the whims of the entities that now hold dominion over these cursed realms. On worlds claimed by Khorne, mountains of brass and bone thrust skyward from seas of boiling blood, while the air itself carries the metallic tang of spilled gore, and the constant sound of clashing weapons echoes from empty battlefields where phantom armies fight eternal wars. Tzeentch's influence manifests in worlds where change itself becomes the only constant. Cities rebuild themselves continuously, their architecture flowing like liquid, as streets become towers and towers become abyssal pits that lead to libraries containing books written in languages that have not yet been invented. The very ground shifts beneath the feet of any who dare walk these lands, transforming from crystal to flesh to pure thought and back again, according to patterns too complex for mortal minds to comprehend. Nurgle's touch creates worlds of perpetual decay and rebirth, where death and life exist in constant, nauseating harmony. Forests of diseased trees bear fruit that rots even as it grows, while rivers of pus and bile carry the seeds of new plagues to distant shores. The inhabitants of such worlds exist in states of living death, their bodies hosting gardens of exotic diseases that bloom in pustulant flowers across their rotting flesh, yet they continue to function with a vitality that mocks the natural order. Slaanesh's worlds present perhaps the most alien landscapes of all, where sensation itself becomes geography. Mountains of crystallized pleasure rise from valleys carved by rivers of liquid sound, while palaces built from hardened ecstasy house courts, where the very air intoxicates any who breathe it. Colors exist here that have no names in any mortal language, and music plays continuously from sources that exist in dimensions perpendicular to normal space. The distinction between Daemon Worlds and other chaos-tainted locations becomes crucial when understanding the true scope of chaos corruption throughout the galaxy. Chaos Space Marine Fortress worlds, while certainly corrupted by their inhabitants' allegiance to the ruinous powers, maintain their fundamental connection to real space. Planets like the Iron Warrior's strongholds or the Night Lord's hidden bases exist within the material universe, subject to its laws even as they serve the enemies of mankind. Their corruption is primarily spiritual and technological rather than ontological. They remain part of the same reality as Holy Terra, however twisted their purpose may be. Similarly, worlds suffering under chaos cults or those that have fallen to heretical governors represent corruption of a different order entirely. These planets may witness demonic incursions, host blasphemous rituals, or serve as staging grounds for chaos invasions, but their fundamental nature remains anchored in the materium. A planetary defense force may still function according to recognizable military doctrine, even if they serve the dark gods. Cities may be decorated with chaos iconography, and their populations may engage in heretical practices, but the buildings still obey architectural principles, and the streets still lead from one location to another in predictable ways. The key difference lies in the relationship between cause and effect, between physical law and metaphysical reality. On a cult world, a heretic may summon a demon through ritual and sacrifice, but the demon remains a visitor from another realm, bound by the terms of its summoning and limited by the constraints of operating within real space. On a demon world, the demons are not visitors but residents, native to a realm where their nature has become part of the world's fundamental structure. This transformation extends beyond mere physical changes to encompass the very concept of existence itself. On Daemon Worlds, the past, present, and future become fluid concepts. Battles that occurred millennia ago may replay themselves endlessly, with the participants unaware that they died long ago. Structures may exist in multiple time periods simultaneously, appearing as ruins in one moment and pristine fortresses in the next. The dead may walk among the living, not as undead creatures animated by necromancy, but as natural inhabitants of a realm where death has lost its meaning. The inhabitants of Daemon Worlds, whether they are the original human populations transformed by the world's corruption or entities that have migrated there from the warp, exist in states that defy conventional understanding of life and consciousness. They may retain memories of their former existence while simultaneously experiencing the reality of their current form, creating beings that exist as living paradoxes. A former Imperial Guard sergeant might remember his service to the Emperor, while simultaneously understanding himself to be a demon of Khorne that has always existed within the Blood God's realm. These worlds serve as more than mere strongholds or bases of operation for the forces of chaos. They function as breeding grounds for new forms of corruption, laboratories where the ruinous powers experiment with the fundamental nature of reality itself. The lessons learned in reshaping these worlds provide templates for larger-scale corruption, offering insights into how entire star systems, or even larger regions of space, might be transformed according to the will of the Dark Gods. The strategic implications of Daemon Worlds extend far beyond their immediate threat to nearby Imperial systems. Each successful transformation represents a permanent foothold for chaos within real space, a beachhead from which further corruption can spread. Unlike conventional military threats that can be contained through blockades or destroyed through concentrated firepower, Daemon Worlds represent existential challenges to the very concept of an ordered universe. They cannot be reclaimed through conventional means because they have fundamentally ceased to be part of the reality that such means were designed to affect. The catastrophic events of the 13th Black Crusade fundamentally altered the galaxy's relationship with Daemon Worlds, transforming what had previously been isolated pockets of corruption into a sprawling network of demonic realms that now threaten the very foundations of Imperial civilization. When Abaddon the Despoiler finally achieved his long-sought victory on Cadia, the destruction of that fortress world's pylons unleashed consequences that reverberated across the entire galaxy, creating the massive warp storm known as the Cicatrix Maledictum, or the Great Rift. The Great Rift represents more than simply another warp storm, however massive its scale. This cosmic wound stretches from the Eye of Terror to the galactic south, effectively bisecting the Imperium and creating conditions that have accelerated the transformation of worlds into demonic realms at an unprecedented rate. The Rift's influence extends far beyond its visible boundaries, creating ripple effects throughout local space that weaken the barriers between the materium and immaterium across thousands of star systems. Within the immediate vicinity of the Great Rift, entire sectors have experienced reality breakdown on a scale previously seen only within established chaos strongholds like the Eye of Terror or the Maelstrom. The Nachmund Gauntlet, once a relatively stable corridor of space connecting the Imperium's two halves, now hosts dozens of worlds where demonic manifestation has become a daily occurrence. Imperial Navy patrol fleets report encounters with planets where the surface appears normal from orbit, only to reveal landscapes of impossible geometry and demon-infested cities when approached for closer inspection. The weakening of reality's fundamental structure has created conditions where the traditional catalysts for Daemon world transformation operate with terrifying efficiency. Worlds that might have required centuries of sustained chaos worship to achieve demonic transformation now succumb within decades or even years. The psychic resonance created by the Great Rift amplifies the effects of ritual sacrifice, heretical devotion, and mass trauma to degrees that overwhelm the natural resistance of real space to warp intrusion. Agrippina, the great forge world that served as a crucial manufacturing center for the Cadian Gate's defenses, exemplifies this accelerated corruption. Following the world's partial fall during the 13th Black Crusade, the surviving population found themselves trapped within a reality increasingly subject to demonic influence. The Forge world's massive industrial complexes, once dedicated to producing weapons and equipment for the Imperial war effort, began manifesting characteristics that defied their original design. Assembly lines started producing ammunition that screamed when fired, while servitors began exhibiting behaviors that suggested awareness of their demonic corruption despite their lobotomized state. The transformation of Agrippina proceeded with shocking rapidity compared to historical examples of Daemon world creation. Within months of the Great Rift's formation, entire manufactorums were reporting production quotas being met by materials that appeared spontaneously within storage facilities, despite no record of their creation or transport. Tech priests investigating these anomalies discovered that the Forge World's machine spirits had been replaced by entities that responded to binary cant with laughter that registered as harmonic frequencies in Vox transmissions. The strategic implications of this accelerated transformation process extend far beyond individual world losses. The Imperium now faces the unprecedented challenge of Daemon Worlds emerging within previously secure sectors, often in locations that had served as vital links in supply chains or communication networks for millennia. The Mordian subsector, historically notable for its disciplined Imperial Guard regiments and stable governance, now hosts at least 3 confirmed Daemon Worlds, where former hive cities have become sprawling monuments to the ruinous powers. These newly transformed worlds present unique challenges for Imperial forces attempting to maintain control over their surrounding systems. Traditional quarantine protocols, developed over millennia of experience with isolated chaos incursions, prove inadequate when dealing with Daemon Worlds that emerge within established trade routes or communication networks. The world of Mordian Prime itself, while not fully transformed, experiences regular incursions from its demonically corrupted neighboring worlds, with entities that appear to be former Imperial citizens arriving via transport ships that sensors confirm departed from planets that orbital reconnaissance shows to be uninhabitable wastelands. The phenomenon of permanent warp rifts has become increasingly common throughout the regions affected by the Great Rift's influence. These tiers in reality, ranging from microscopic fractures barely detectable by the most sensitive psyker abilities to massive wounds in space-time visible to standard auger arrays, serve as conduits through which demonic energy flows continuously into real space. Unlike temporary warp storms that eventually dissipate or demon incursions that can be contained through conventional military action, these permanent rifts create ongoing connections between specific locations in the materium and corresponding regions within the warp. The world of Vigilus, despite successfully resisting multiple attempts at conquest during the War of Beasts and subsequent conflicts, demonstrates how these permanent rifts can sustain demonic transformation even in the face of determined Imperial resistance. The planet's surface bears dozens of stable warp rifts, each connected to different regions of the immaterium and allowing different aspects of chaos corruption to manifest simultaneously. Sectors of the world experience the bone-deep cold of Nurgle's gardens, while adjacent areas burn with the brass flames of Khorne's forges, creating a patchwork reality where different physical laws operate within walking distance of each other. The Nachmund Gauntlet has become a crucial testing ground for understanding how these permanent rifts function and spread. Imperial forces maintaining the corridor report that warp rifts appear to exhibit behavior, suggesting some form of intelligence or purpose behind their placement. Rather than manifesting randomly, new rifts consistently appear in locations that maximize their strategic impact, often emerging within critical infrastructure facilities or at transportation hubs where their disruptive effects can spread to multiple worlds simultaneously. Astropathic communications from worlds within the Imperium Nihilus reveal that the isolation created by the Great Rift has accelerated Daemon World transformation through a different mechanism entirely. Cut off from the Astronomican's light and the stabilizing influence of Holy Terra, these worlds exist in a state of spiritual isolation that makes them more susceptible to warp intrusion. The collective despair and fear generated by entire populations believing themselves abandoned by the Emperor creates psychic conditions that mirror those found on worlds undergoing active chaos corruption. The fortress world of Cadia Secundus, established as a replacement for the destroyed original Cadia, illustrates the challenges facing Imperial forces attempting to establish new strongholds within the Great Rift's area of influence. Despite extensive purification rituals and the deployment of massive military resources, the world experiences daily manifestations of demonic activity that range from minor reality fluctuations to full-scale incursions requiring immediate military response. The planet's defenders have adapted to operating in an environment where standard tactical doctrine, must account for the possibility that terrain features may change without warning, or that enemy forces may include entities that exist partially outside normal space-time. The increased frequency of demonic incursions throughout the galaxy has created a new category of worlds that exist in transitional states between standard Imperial planets and full demon worlds. These liminal realms maintain enough connection to real space to support normal human life and Imperial governance, but experience regular intrusions from the warp that gradually erode their stability. The Adeptus Munitorum has established new classification protocols for worlds exhibiting what Imperial scholars term progressive demonic saturation, recognizing that traditional binary distinctions between loyal and corrupted worlds no longer adequately describe the complex reality facing the Imperium. The world of Talarn, famous for its desert warfare specialists and historical resistance to Iron Warrior sieges, now exhibits characteristics that place it firmly within this transitional category. The planet's vast deserts experience regular sandstorms that carry more than simple particulate matter, with Imperial Guard regiments reporting encounters with phantom armies that appear during these weather events. These manifestations follow no predictable pattern, sometimes taking the form of ancient Talarn defenders from the world's storied history, other times appearing as entities that bear no resemblance to any known human military formation. The establishment of the Indomitus Crusade represented the Imperium's most significant attempt to address the strategic challenges posed by the proliferation of demon worlds following the Great Rift's creation. Primarch Roboute Guilliman's forces encountered dozens of worlds that had undergone various stages of demonic transformation, requiring the development of new military doctrines specifically designed to operate in environments where conventional tactical assumptions no longer applied. The Crusades reports describe engagements where Imperial forces found themselves fighting enemies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, or attempting to secure objectives that changed their fundamental nature based on the tactical approach used to reach them. The Plague Wars, fought primarily within the Ultramar system, demonstrated how established demon worlds could serve as staging grounds for massive invasions of nearby systems. Mortarian's forces, operating from demon worlds within Nurgle's domain, launched coordinated attacks that relied on the unique properties of their demonically transformed base worlds to support logistics chains that would have been impossible using conventional military infrastructure. Supplies and reinforcements arrived through warp rifts that connected directly to the Plague Planet, allowing Death Guard forces to maintain offensive operations across multiple star systems simultaneously. The strategic implications of this new reality extend beyond immediate military concerns to encompass fundamental questions about the Imperium's long-term viability. The traditional Imperial strategy of containing chaos corruption through quarantine and eventual purge operations assumes that corrupted worlds remain exceptional cases within a larger framework of stable Imperial space. The post-Great Rift galaxy presents a scenario where demon worlds and transitional realms may become common enough to represent a significant percentage of the Imperium's total territorial holdings. Imperial forces operating within the Imperium Nihilus have developed modified operational procedures that acknowledge the permanent presence of demonic corruption within their area of operations. Rather than treating demon world encounters as exceptional events requiring specialized response protocols, these forces now incorporate anti-demon tactics into standard military doctrine. Regimental commanders receive training in recognizing the signs of incipient demon world transformation, while supply chains include equipment specifically designed for operations in environments where physical laws may operate differently than baseline Imperial standards. The Adeptus Mechanicus has established new research protocols for studying the technological implications of demon world proliferation. Forge worlds within the Great Rift's influence report increasing incidents of machine spirit corruption that appears to spread through data networks, suggesting that demonic influence can propagate through technological systems in ways that bypass traditional containment measures. The Fabricator General of Mars has issued emergency protocols requiring all Forge worlds to maintain isolated research facilities for studying demon-corrupted technology without risking contamination of primary manufacturing systems. The Daemon Worlds claimed by Khorne present landscapes that exist in perpetual states of warfare, where the very ground beneath one's feet consists of compacted bone meal and dried blood that has accumulated over millennia of constant battle. These realms manifest the blood god's fundamental nature through geography that serves no purpose beyond facilitating endless violence, with mountain ranges carved into the shapes of massive skulls, whose empty eye sockets serve as gateways between different theaters of eternal war. The skies above these worlds burn with a crimson hue that filters all light through the color of spilled blood, while the air itself carries the metallic tang of iron and the acrid smoke of gunpowder that never fully dissipates. Brass citadels rise from these blood-soaked landscapes like monuments to martial prowess, their walls constructed from metal that gleams with an internal fire despite showing no visible heat source. These fortresses follow no architectural logic beyond the practical requirements of defense and the aesthetic demands of glorifying warfare. Battlements bristle with weapon emplacements that fire continuously into the surrounding terrain, not at specific targets, but simply to maintain the constant sound of battle that Khorne demands. The citadel's interiors consist primarily of armories, training grounds, and trophy halls, where the skulls of worthy opponents are displayed according to complex hierarchies that demon princes spend centuries perfecting. The weapon forges within these brass citadels operate without fuel or raw materials in any conventional sense, drawing their power directly from the violence that permeates these worlds. Mastersmiths who were once mortal champions work alongside demon smiths, whose forms shift between humanoid and mechanical configurations, as they craft blades that scream when drawn and firearms that hunger for the blood of their targets. These forges produce weapons that exist partially within the warp, allowing them to wound enemies that conventional arms cannot touch, while simultaneously inflicting damage that extends beyond the physical realm into the victim's soul. The battlefields surrounding these citadels stretch beyond the horizon in every direction, marked by terrain features that serve tactical purposes while simultaneously functioning as monuments to specific battles or champions. Trenches carved from solid bone extend for hundreds of kilometers, their walls decorated with the preserved heads of warriors who died fighting within them. Artillery craters filled with boiling blood serve as both obstacles to advancing forces and sources of ammunition for the demon engines that patrol these killing fields with mechanical precision. Bloodthirsters maintain dominion over these domains through a combination of direct combat leadership and the manipulation of the endless warfare that defines their realms. These greater demons do not rule in the traditional sense of issuing commands or managing resources, but rather through their presence on battlefields, where their participation elevates ordinary skirmishes into legendary conflicts worthy of Khorne's attention. A bloodthirster's arrival at any engagement immediately transforms the tactical situation, as both allied and enemy forces find their combat effectiveness enhanced by proximity to such a powerful manifestation of the blood god's will. The influence of bloodthirsters extends beyond their immediate combat capabilities to encompass their role as focal points for the psychic energy generated by constant warfare. Each act of violence committed within their presence feeds directly into the demon's power, which in turn radiates outward to sustain the unnatural properties that define Khornate demon worlds. The brass citadels maintain their structural integrity not through conventional engineering, but through the accumulated violence that bloodthirsters channel into their foundations, creating buildings that grow stronger with each battle fought within their walls. Lesser Khornate demons serve specialized functions within this ecosystem of eternal warfare, each type contributing to the maintenance of conditions necessary for their realm's continued existence. Bloodlitters patrol the battlefields in formations that mirror military units, while simultaneously serving as manifestations of pure aggression that inspire nearby mortal warriors to greater acts of violence. These demons carry weapons forged from crystallized rage, blades that cut through armor and flesh with equal ease while leaving wounds that refuse to heal properly, ensuring that even survivors of encounters with bloodletters carry permanent reminders of their brush with Khorne's servants. Fleshhounds track fleeing enemies across vast distances, their supernatural senses capable of following blood trails that have been cold for decades or centuries. These demon beasts serve as both hunters and symbols of Khorne's refusal to allow cowardice or retreat to go unpunished. Their presence on Khorne Daemon Worlds ensures that battles, once begun, continue until one side has been completely annihilated, as the mere possibility of escape draws these creatures like carrion birds to a battlefield. The Skull Throne itself, while existing primarily within the warp, manifests aspects of its presence on the most favored Khorne Daemon Worlds through structures that serve as local representations of the Blood God's seat of power. These throne rooms, built within the deepest chambers of the brass citadels, contain chairs carved from single massive skulls of creatures so large that their original nature remains a subject of speculation among imperial scholars. The thrones sit empty most of the time, but during periods of particularly intense warfare, witnesses report seeing shadowy figures occupying these seats, their attention focused on the battles raging across the world's surface. Medrengard represents the most extensively documented example of a world that has undergone partial transformation into a Khorne demon realm while retaining enough connection to real space to support large-scale military operations. The Iron Warrior's Fortress World demonstrates how prolonged exposure to systematic violence and suffering can create conditions that attract Khorne influence even when the original inhabitants serve different aspects of chaos. The slave populations used to construct the world's massive fortifications have endured such extensive brutalization that their collective anguish has begun manifesting as spontaneous demon incursions, focused specifically on perpetuating the cycle of violence that created them. The gladiatorial arenas that emerge naturally on Khorne Daemon Worlds serve multiple functions within the ecosystem of eternal warfare that defines these realms. These structures appear wherever sufficient numbers of warriors gather, materializing from the ground itself as circular or octagonal spaces surrounded by tiered seating that accommodates audiences of demons, cultists, and the restless spirits of warriors who died in previous contests. The arena's floors consist of sand mixed with bone dust and dried blood, creating a surface that provides excellent footing for combatants while absorbing fresh blood to feed the demon world's continued existence. The contests held within these arenas follow rules that emphasize skill and bravery while ensuring maximum bloodshed and spectacle. Single combat between champions represents the most common form of entertainment, but larger engagements involving entire squads or even companies of warriors occur when circumstances warrant such displays. The audiences for these contests include entities whose presence alone influences the outcome of battles, as their approval or disapproval manifests as tangible advantages or disadvantages for the combatants. Winners of arena contests receive rewards that extend beyond simple material prizes to encompass fundamental changes to their nature and capabilities. Mortal champions who prove themselves worthy through repeated victories find their bodies enhanced with demonic strength and resilience, while their weapons become permanently bonded to their souls in ways that allow the blades to manifest even when the warrior appears to be unarmed. These transformations occur gradually, allowing recipients to adapt to their enhanced capabilities while maintaining enough of their original identity to serve as inspiring examples for other mortals seeking Khorne's favor. The transformation of conquered populations into frenzied berserkers represents one of the most systematic processes observable on Khorne Daemon Worlds. This conversion begins with exposure to the constant sounds of battle that permeate these realms, as the endless clash of weapons and cries of warriors gradually erode the mental barriers that normally regulate aggressive impulses. Mortals who spend extended periods within these environments report experiencing intrusive thoughts focused on violence and combat, along with physical symptoms that include increased muscle mass and enhanced reflexes that appear without corresponding training or exercise. The process accelerates when individuals participate directly in the warfare that defines these worlds, regardless of their initial motivations or allegiances. Imperial Guard units that find themselves stranded on Khorne Daemon Worlds often undergo complete personality transformations within weeks of their arrival, as the psychic pressure generated by constant exposure to demonic influence overwhelms their conditioning and indoctrination. These transformed soldiers retain their tactical knowledge and military skills while losing all restraint and discipline, becoming berserkers who fight with suicidal courage and inhuman endurance. The brass collars that appear around the necks of particularly favored berserkers serve as both symbols of Khorne's approval and functional devices that enhance their combat capabilities. These collars manifest spontaneously during moments of exceptional violence, materializing around the throats of warriors whose actions have attracted the blood god's direct attention. The collars provide protection against psychic attacks and enhance the wearer's physical strength, but more importantly, they serve as conduits that allow Khorne's influence to flow directly into the material realm through the actions of his chosen champions. Demon engines patrol the battlefields of Khorne Worlds as mechanical manifestations of the blood god's appetite for destruction, their forms combining advanced technology with demonic essence in ways that create vehicles capable of independent operation for centuries without maintenance or fuel. These war machines follow programming that prioritizes maximum carnage over tactical objectives, often abandoning strategic positions to pursue fleeing enemies or engaging in prolonged duels with enemy vehicles that serve no purpose beyond generating spectacular displays of violence. The Defiler engines that serve Khorne forces demonstrate how Daemon World environments can enhance and modify existing chaos technology beyond its original specifications. These walking battle fortresses, already formidable in their standard configurations, undergo continuous evolution when deployed to Khorne Daemon Worlds, developing new weapon systems and defensive capabilities that manifest through exposure to the concentrated violence that permeates these realms. Their machine spirits, already corrupted by demonic influence, achieve new levels of malevolent intelligence that allow them to coordinate complex tactical maneuvers while maintaining their primary focus on maximizing battlefield casualties. The blood rivers that flow across Khorne Daemon Worlds serve as both transportation networks and sources of raw material for the demon engines and weapon forges that support these realms' military infrastructure. These waterways carry more than simple liquid, as the blood contains the dissolved essence of every warrior who has died within the watershed, creating a substance that possesses supernatural properties when used in the construction of weapons and armor. Demon smiths harvest this blood directly from the rivers, using specialized containers that preserve its potency during the forging process. Naval vessels designed for operation on these blood rivers incorporate features that would be impossible on conventional waterways, including hulls that feed directly on the liquid they displace and weapon systems that draw ammunition from the surrounding medium. These ships serve as mobile fortresses that can appear anywhere within a river system, allowing Khorne forces to project power across vast distances while maintaining the element of surprise that makes their attacks particularly devastating. The recruitment of new champions from among the mortal populations of conquered worlds occurs through processes that combine traditional military selection with trials that test candidates' capacity for sustained violence and their resistance to the psychological pressures that accompany life on a demon world. Promising individuals undergo training regimens that would kill ordinary humans, including combat exercises conducted in environments where death carries permanent consequences and weapons practice, using blades that hunger for their wielder's blood as eagerly as they thirst for enemies. The most successful candidates eventually earn the right to challenge existing champions for position and status within the Daemon World's hierarchy, participating in formal duels that serve as both entertainment for demon audiences and practical demonstrations of combat skill. These challenges follow ancient protocols that ensure maximum bloodshed while providing opportunities for exceptional warriors to advance regardless of their original social status or military rank. The demon worlds claimed by Tzeentch defy comprehension through their fundamental rejection of stability and predictability, existing as realms where change itself has become the only constant governing reality. These domains manifest the architect of fate's nature through landscapes that rebuild themselves continuously according to patterns too complex for mortal minds to follow, with crystalline spires that grow from the ground like living things, while simultaneously dissolving into component elements that reform as entirely different structures within moments of their destruction. The very concept of mapping such territories becomes meaningless, as cartographers who attempt to record the geography of Tzeentchian worlds find their charts becoming obsolete before the ink has dried on the parchment. Impossible geometries dominate the architecture of these realms, with buildings that extend in directions that do not exist within normal three-dimensional space and corridors that lead to destinations determined more by the traveler's intentions than by physical pathways. Towers spiral upward and downward simultaneously, their surfaces covered in equations that solve themselves while observers watch, the mathematical formulas shifting from one solution to another as the underlying problems change to accommodate new variables that emerge from the calculations themselves. These structures serve no practical purpose in any conventional sense, existing purely as expressions of Tzeentch's delight in complexity and paradox. The crystal labyrinths represent the most characteristic feature of Tzeentchian demon worlds, vast maze-like structures that extend both above and below ground level in configurations that challenge basic assumptions about spatial relationships. These labyrinths construct themselves from materials that appear to be crystallized thought, with walls that display the reflected images of possibilities that might occur rather than events that have actually happened. Travelers within the labyrinths report seeing their own reflections engaged in activities they have never performed, wearing clothing they do not own, and speaking with people they have never met, as the crystal surfaces show potential futures that shift and change based on decisions the observers have not yet made. The pathways within these labyrinths follow routing systems that respond to the psychological state of those attempting to navigate them, with corridors that extend or contract based on the confidence level of travelers and intersections that present different options depending on the fears and desires of those who approach them. Mortal sorcerers who enter the labyrinth seeking knowledge or power find themselves confronting challenges that test not only their magical abilities, but their capacity to maintain coherent thought processes while surrounded by environments that actively work to undermine rational thinking. Lords of Change maintain dominion over these shifting realms through their mastery of the complex schemes that govern the apparently random changes affecting their domains. These greater demons do not control the transformations directly, but rather understand the underlying patterns that determine how and when changes occur, allowing them to position themselves and their servants to take advantage of favorable alterations while avoiding the destructive effects of less beneficial shifts. Their presence serves as a stabilizing influence that prevents the constant changes from reaching levels that would make the demon worlds completely uninhabitable, even by demonic standards. The schemes orchestrated by Lords of Change operate on timescales that span millennia and involve causality chains so complex that individual events may serve multiple purposes within different plots simultaneously. A single decision made by a mortal sorcerer seeking power within the crystal labyrinths might simultaneously advance a Lord of Change's plans for corrupting a distant imperial world, provide the final component needed for a ritual that will not be performed for another 1,000 years, and create the conditions necessary for a completely unrelated scheme involving entities that have not yet been born. These greater demons communicate with their servants and each other through methods that transcend conventional language, sharing information through direct transfers of conceptual understanding that allow complex instructions to be conveyed instantaneously across vast distances. Their conversations, when overheard by mortals, appear as streams of mathematical equations, alchemical formulas, and philosophical paradoxes that shift meaning continuously as the speakers adjust their positions within ongoing debates that began before the current galaxy existed and will continue long after its stars have burned out. Pink horrors serve as the primary agents through which Lords of Change implement their schemes within the material realm, their apparently chaotic behavior actually following carefully orchestrated patterns that contribute to larger strategic objectives. These demons possess an intimate understanding of probability mathematics that allows them to manipulate seemingly random events in ways that produce specific desired outcomes over extended periods. Their ability to split into blue horrors when destroyed, and the subsequent transformation of blue horrors into brimstone horrors, creates cascading chains of causality that can influence events across multiple worlds and time periods. The magical flames wielded by pink horrors burn with colors that exist outside the normal spectrum of visible light, creating fires that consume concepts rather than physical matter. These flames can destroy ideas, erase memories, or burn away the logical connections between cause and effect, leaving behind gaps in reality that fill themselves with new possibilities drawn from the infinite potential of the warp. Structures touched by these flames may continue to exist physically while losing their intended purpose, as buildings designed as fortresses become libraries or weapons transform into musical instruments without any change in their external appearance. The libraries of forbidden knowledge that emerge spontaneously on Tzeentchian Daemon Worlds contain collections that expand continuously as new information manifests on shelves that extend in directions perpendicular to normal space. These repositories hold not only records of events that have occurred throughout galactic history, but also detailed accounts of possibilities that might happen under different circumstances, creating archives where researchers can study the consequences of decisions that were never made and learn from the experiences of people who never existed. The books within these libraries write themselves as observers read them, with text that changes to provide exactly the information the reader seeks, while simultaneously withholding crucial details that would make the knowledge truly useful. Scholars who spend extended periods studying within these collections report discovering texts that appear to have been written specifically for them, containing references to their personal histories and detailed knowledge of their individual research interests. Yet these same books become incomprehensible to other readers who attempt to study them. The librarian demons that maintain these collections exist as living catalogs capable of locating any piece of information within their domains, while ensuring that the knowledge remains sufficiently obscure to prevent its misuse by unworthy seekers. These entities appear as constantly shifting amalgamations of parchment, ink, and binding materials that reorganize themselves based on the needs of their current tasks, sometimes manifesting as humanoid figures composed of floating books and scrolls, other times taking the form of massive mechanical devices that sort and file information according to systems too complex for mortal understanding. Mortal sorcerers who seek power within these libraries face challenges that test their ability to distinguish between useful knowledge and dangerous misinformation, as the texts they study contain equal measures of genuine wisdom and carefully crafted deceptions designed to lead ambitious students down paths that ultimately serve Tzeentch's purposes rather than their own goals. The process of learning from these sources requires practitioners to maintain perfect mental discipline while simultaneously remaining open to concepts that challenge their fundamental assumptions about reality. The temporal distortions that affect Tzeentchian Daemon Worlds create environments where linear time becomes a suggestion rather than an absolute constraint, allowing past, present, and future events to occur simultaneously within the same physical locations. Visitors to these realms may witness battles that occurred centuries ago while participating in negotiations that will not officially begin for decades, as the normal sequence of cause and effect breaks down under the influence of Tzeentch's manipulation of temporal mechanics. These time loops and causality paradoxes serve specific functions within the greater schemes orchestrated by the Lords of Change, creating opportunities for information and resources to be transferred between different time periods in ways that circumvent the normal limitations imposed by chronological sequence. A weapon forged in the present might be delivered to warriors fighting in the past, while knowledge gained from future events can be used to influence decisions made in earlier time periods, creating feedback loops that reinforce themselves across multiple temporal iterations. The inhabitants of these temporally unstable regions adapt to their circumstances by developing cognitive frameworks that allow them to function effectively despite the absence of reliable chronological reference points. Sorcerers who spend extended periods within these environments learn to think in terms of probability clouds rather than fixed sequences of events, planning their actions based on the likelihood of desired outcomes rather than attempting to predict specific future developments. The Screaming Vortex, a massive warp storm that serves as a gateway between the material universe and Tzeentch's domain within the warp, demonstrates how temporal distortions can affect entire star systems rather than individual worlds. Imperial forces that enter the vortex report encountering fleets of ships that appear to be their own vessels from different time periods, leading to engagements where commanders find themselves fighting against alternate versions of their own tactical decisions, while attempting to complete missions that change their objectives continuously as the battles progress. The demon engines that serve Tzeentchian forces incorporate temporal manipulation devices that allow them to exist in multiple time periods simultaneously, creating vehicles that can attack targets before moving into firing position and defend against weapons that have not yet been fired. These machines follow operational parameters that account for the fluid nature of causality within their operating environment, adjusting their behavior patterns continuously based on information received from future versions of themselves. The recruitment and training of new sorcerers on Tzeentchian Daemon Worlds occurs through processes that deliberately expose candidates to the psychological pressures created by constant exposure to impossible realities and temporal paradoxes. Promising individuals undergo education programs that teach them to embrace uncertainty and change, while maintaining enough mental stability to function as effective agents of Tzeentch's will within the material universe. The most successful students learn to use the unpredictable nature of their environment as a source of power rather than an obstacle to overcome, developing magical techniques that draw strength from chaos and uncertainty, while channeling that energy into focused effects that serve their immediate tactical needs. These abilities prove particularly effective when deployed against enemies who rely on predictable strategies and conventional tactical doctrine, as Tzeentchian sorcerers can adapt their approach continuously throughout an engagement to counter whatever responses their opponents develop. The Thousand Suns Traitor Legion maintains several fortress worlds within regions of space, where Tzeentchian influence has created conditions similar to those found on full Daemon Worlds, using these bases to conduct research into the fundamental nature of change and mutation, while training new generations of sorcerers in techniques that would be impossible to master within normal real-space environments. These facilities combine traditional military infrastructure with laboratories designed specifically for studying temporal mechanics and probability manipulation, creating installations that serve both strategic and educational functions within the Legion's long-term objectives. The planet of the sorcerers, while existing primarily within the warp, manifests aspects of its reality within the material universe through temporary manifestations that allow Thousand Suns forces to project power into real space while maintaining their primary base of operations within Tzeentch's domain. These manifestations appear as cities of impossible architecture that exist for precisely as long as needed to complete specific tactical objectives before dissolving back into the raw stuff of change that comprises their fundamental nature. The Daemon Worlds claimed by Nurgle manifest as grotesque parodies of natural ecosystems, where the fundamental processes of life and death have been perverted into cycles of perpetual decay and diseased renewal that mock the clean simplicity of natural mortality. These realms present landscapes dominated by fetid swamplands that stretch beyond horizons obscured by perpetual fog, composed of bacterial spores and the exhalations of countless rotting organisms. The swamps themselves consist of stagnant water, mixed with bodily fluids from creatures that have been decomposing for millennia, creating a viscous medium that supports forms of life too alien and disease to exist within normal biological frameworks. The trees that emerge from these putrid marshlands grow to impossible sizes despite their obviously diseased state, their bark weeping constant streams of pus that feeds the fungal network spreading across their surfaces like living carpets of decay. These diseased forests create canopies so thick that sunlight filtering through their leaves takes on a sickly green hue that seems to accelerate the decomposition of any organic matter it touches. The branches themselves serve as hosts to parasitic growths that bloom into flowers of crystallized disease, their petals releasing spores that carry new strains of plague to distant regions of the demon world. Beneath the forest canopy, the ground consists of layers of composted organic matter accumulated over eons of continuous decay, creating a surface that yields underfoot with the consistency of partially liquefied flesh. This substrate supports plant life that exists in states of simultaneous growth and rot, with vines that sprout new leaves even as their older growth dissolves into component nutrients that feed the next generation of diseased vegetation. The root systems of these plants extend deep into the demon world's core, creating underground networks that pulse with the circulation of infected sap and serve as conduits for spreading new forms of corruption across vast distances. The gardens that represent Nurgle's most deliberate horticultural efforts occupy clearings within the diseased forests, their layouts following patterns that combine aesthetic considerations with practical requirements for cultivating the most virulent strains of disease possible within controlled environments. These spaces feature carefully tended beds where plague-bearing plants grow in neat rows, their organization creating a disturbing contrast with the chaotic corruption that defines most Nurglite environments. The gardeners who tend these plots work with tools forged from infected bone and metal that has been deliberately corroded to enhance its ability to spread contamination through contact with healthy tissue. The irrigation systems that water these gardens draw their supply from rivers of liquid disease that flow throughout Nurgle's domains, carrying dissolved pathogens from every corner of the demon world to ensure that each plant receives exposure to the widest possible variety of corrupting influences. These waterways change color continuously as different disease strains achieve temporary dominance within the flowing mixture, creating streams that shift from the yellow-green of infected bile to the deep purple of gangrenous blood to the translucent clarity of purified toxins that kill through their very purity. Great Unclean Ones serve as the primary architects of these diseased ecosystems, their massive forms serving as living laboratories where new strains of plague develop within the folds of their rotting flesh before being released into the wider environment to test their effectiveness against existing forms of life. These greater demons possess an intimate understanding of biological processes that allows them to manipulate disease vectors with the precision of master craftsmen, creating pathogens that target specific physiological systems while leaving others intact to ensure that victims survive long enough to serve as effective carriers for further transmission. The cultivation methods employed by Great Unclean Ones involve direct physical interaction with their diseased crops, as these demons water their gardens with secretions from their own bodies and fertilize the soil with chunks of their own rotting flesh that regenerate continuously to provide an endless supply of corrupted organic matter. Their presence alone transforms the local environment, as the diseases that comprise their physical forms spread through airborne transmission to infect every living thing within considerable distances of their locations. These greater demons maintain detailed knowledge of every disease strain that has ever existed within their domains, carrying within their bloated bodies samples of plagues that destroyed entire civilizations millennia ago alongside experimental pathogens that have not yet been released upon the galaxy. Their conversations with each other consist largely of technical discussions about optimal infection vectors and debates over the aesthetic merits of different symptoms, as they treat disease creation as both a scientific discipline and an artistic endeavor worthy of serious critical analysis. Plaguebearers function as the primary workforce responsible for the day-to-day maintenance of Nurgle's gardens, their methodical approach to cultivation creating an efficient system for producing new diseases, while ensuring that existing strains continue to evolve and adapt to changing environmental conditions. These lesser demons possess an instinctive understanding of agricultural principles that they apply to the cultivation of disease with the same dedication that mortal farmers might show toward food crops, carefully monitoring soil conditions and adjusting growing environments to maximize the virulence of their harvests. The tools used by plaguebearers in their gardening work have been specifically designed to spread contamination while performing their intended functions, with pruning shears that inject infected sap into healthy plant tissue and watering implements that add precisely measured doses of new pathogens to irrigation systems. These demons work in organized teams that follow seasonal cycles determined not by astronomical phenomena, but by the natural rhythms of disease progression, planting new strains during periods when existing infections reach peak virulence and harvesting mature diseases when they achieve optimal transmissibility. The record-keeping practices of plaguebearers extend to their agricultural activities, as these demons maintain detailed logs documenting the development of each disease strain from initial cultivation through final deployment against target populations. Their ledgers contain information about optimal growing conditions, effective transmission methods, and the specific symptoms produced by different variants, creating comprehensive databases that allow for the systematic improvement of existing diseases and the development of entirely new pathogenic organisms. The paradoxical beauty that characterizes Nurgle's domains manifests most clearly in the visual spectacle created by diseased organisms that display colors and patterns of stunning complexity despite their obviously corrupted nature. Flowers that bloom from infected flesh create displays that rival the most elaborate gardens in their aesthetic appeal, their petals showing intricate patterns of decay that shift and change as the underlying disease processes progress through their natural cycles. The symmetry displayed by these patterns suggests an underlying order that governs even the most chaotic aspects of corruption, revealing mathematical principles that operate within biological systems regardless of their health status. The fungi that grow throughout Nurgle's gardens demonstrate this paradoxical beauty through their elaborate fruiting bodies that display every color visible to human perception, while simultaneously releasing spores that carry death to any creature that inhales them. These organisms create vast networks of interconnected colonies that communicate through chemical signals, coordinating their reproductive cycles to ensure maximum spore dispersal during optimal atmospheric conditions. The resulting displays of synchronized blooming create spectacular visual effects that can be appreciated even by observers who understand the lethal nature of what they are witnessing. Nurgle's followers find genuine joy in these displays of diseased beauty, their altered perceptions allowing them to appreciate aesthetic qualities that remain invisible to uninfected observers. The psychological changes that accompany exposure to Nurgle's influence include enhanced sensitivity to the visual patterns created by decay processes and an increased ability to find pleasure in sensory experiences that would normally trigger revulsion responses. This transformation allows cultists to function effectively within environments that would drive normal humans insane with disgust and horror. The acceptance of mortality that characterizes Nurgle worship manifests through rituals that celebrate the natural progression from life to death to renewed life, with ceremonies that honor the role of disease in facilitating these transitions. Participants in these rituals deliberately expose themselves to new strains of infection as acts of devotion, viewing their subsequent illness not as suffering, but as participation in the fundamental processes that govern all existence. The communal nature of these ceremonies creates strong bonds between participants who share the experience of simultaneous sickness and spiritual enlightenment. The Plague Planet serves as the primary example of a fully developed Nurglite demon world, its surface covered entirely by interconnected gardens that stretch from pole to pole in an unbroken expanse of diseased vegetation. The planet's atmosphere consists largely of bacterial colonies that have achieved aerial existence, creating weather patterns where rainstorms carry concentrated doses of infection and wind currents distribute spores according to seasonal migration patterns that ensure global coverage of new disease strains. The planet's rotation creates tidal effects in its rivers of liquid corruption, causing regular flooding that spreads accumulated toxins across vast agricultural areas. The cities that exist on the Plague Planet follow urban planning principles designed to optimize disease transmission while providing adequate space for the cultivation and processing of new pathogenic organisms. Streets flow like arteries carrying infected fluids between districts specialized in different aspects of plague production, while residential areas house populations whose primary function involves serving as test subjects for experimental diseases. The architecture incorporates living elements that continue to grow and change as the buildings themselves become infected with the diseases they contain. The industrial facilities on the Plague Planet produce biological weapons on scales that dwarf the manufacturing capabilities of conventional Forge worlds, their production lines consisting of vast vats where disease cultures multiply under carefully controlled conditions. These facilities operate continuously, their output distributed throughout the galaxy via demon ships that carry plague cargoes to target worlds selected according to strategic plans that span centuries. The workers in these facilities exist in states of advanced infection that enhance their productivity while ensuring their complete loyalty to Nurgle's cause. Mortarian's presence on the Plague Planet during the events of the Plague Wars demonstrated how demon primarchs can serve as focal points for organizing large-scale military operations that draw upon the unique resources available on Demon Worlds. The Death Guard Legion's use of the planet as a staging area for their assault on Ultramar showed how diseased ecosystems can support logistics chains that would be impossible using conventional military infrastructure, with supplies and reinforcements generated directly from the Demon World's corrupted biosphere rather than manufactured in traditional facilities. The recruitment of new followers occurs through exposure processes that gradually transform healthy individuals into willing servants of decay, beginning with minor infections that create psychological changes favorable to Nurgle worship before progressing to more severe diseases that complete the physical transformation. The progression follows predictable stages that allow experienced cultists to monitor new recruits and provide guidance during the most difficult phases of their conversion, creating support networks that help maintain morale during periods when the transformation process causes significant discomfort. The final stages of this conversion process result in individuals who retain their original personalities and memories, while gaining enhanced resistance to disease and an altered aesthetic sense that allows them to appreciate the beauty inherent in decay and corruption. These transformed followers serve as effective missionaries who can operate within normal human populations, while gradually spreading Nurgle's influence through seemingly innocent social interactions that expose targets to carefully selected disease strains. The plague ships that transport these diseases between worlds incorporate biological components that continue to evolve during transit, ensuring that each delivery contains strains specifically adapted to the environmental conditions and population genetics of their intended targets. These vessels serve as mobile laboratories where Great Unclean Ones conduct ongoing research into optimal infection methods, while their crews of transformed mortals maintain the ship's living systems through processes that blur the distinction between mechanical maintenance and biological cultivation. The demon worlds claimed by Slaanesh manifest as realms where sensation itself has become tangible geography, creating landscapes that assault the senses with experiences so intense they transcend the normal boundaries between pleasure and pain. These domains feature crystalline spires that rise from foundations of hardened ecstasy, their surfaces reflecting not light but pure sensation that strikes observers as waves of overwhelming stimulation. The spires themselves sing continuously, their harmonic frequencies generated by wind passing through architectural elements designed specifically to create music that exists beyond the range of normal hearing, while simultaneously producing vibrations that resonate within the bones and nervous systems of any creatures within their vicinity. The palaces that crown these impossible structures stretch across multiple dimensions simultaneously, their rooms existing in spaces that overlap and intersect according to principles that prioritize aesthetic impact over physical coherence. Corridors lined with mirrors crafted from crystallized desire lead to chambers where the walls themselves pulse with living color that shifts in response to the emotional states of their occupants. These spaces contain furnishings that adapt their form and function to provide whatever comfort or stimulation their users crave most intensely, creating environments that become more seductive and dangerous with each moment spent within their influence. The sensory gardens that surround these palaces represent Slaanesh's most elaborate attempts to cultivate pure experience as a harvestable resource, featuring plants that exist primarily as sources of concentrated sensation rather than biological organisms in any conventional sense. These gardens contain flowers that emit fragrances capable of inducing euphoric states, so intense they can prove fatal to mortals with insufficient tolerance for pleasure, while trees bear fruit that provides nourishment for the soul rather than the body, feeding directly on the consumer's capacity for experiencing joy and wonder. The pathways through these gardens consist of materials that respond to footsteps by generating tactile sensations that range from the softest silk to surfaces that provide exactly the right amount of resistance to create perfect walking experiences tailored to each individual traveler. The garden designers have arranged these paths to create journeys that build emotional and physical intensity gradually, leading visitors through carefully orchestrated sequences of sensory experiences that culminate in encounters with the garden's most dangerous attractions. Water features throughout the sensory gardens flow with liquids that exist in states between matter and pure sensation, creating fountains that spray crystallized laughter into the air and pools filled with distilled contentment that glows with its own internal light. These installations serve both decorative and functional purposes, as the substances they contain provide raw materials for the creation of new sensory experiences, while simultaneously serving as focal points for meditation and contemplation among Slaanesh's followers. Keepers of secrets orchestrate the endless festivals that define social life on Slaaneshi Daemon Worlds, their perfect understanding of aesthetic principles allowing them to design celebrations that provide optimal stimulation for participants, while ensuring that the experiences remain novel and surprising despite their repetitive nature. These greater demons possess an intuitive grasp of the psychological mechanisms that govern pleasure and desire, enabling them to manipulate the emotional states of entire populations through carefully planned sequences of sensory input that build toward climactic moments of overwhelming satisfaction. The festivals themselves follow complex schedules that account for the varying tolerance levels and preferences of different participant groups, with events designed specifically for mortals occurring simultaneously alongside celebrations intended for demon audiences whose capacity for sensation far exceeds anything achievable by organic nervous systems. The programming of these festivals requires careful coordination between multiple keepers of secrets, each responsible for specific aspects of the overall experience, while maintaining awareness of how their contributions interact with elements provided by their colleagues. The venues used for these celebrations incorporate architectural features that enhance and amplify whatever experiences occur within them, with acoustics designed to make every sound more beautiful and lighting systems that render colors more vivid while simultaneously flattering the appearance of everyone present. The spaces themselves adapt continuously to accommodate the changing needs of ongoing events, with walls that move to create new room configurations and floors that adjust their texture and temperature to provide optimal comfort for whatever activities are taking place. Daemonettes serve as the primary organizers and performers within these festival environments. Their supernatural grace and perfect understanding of aesthetic principles, making them ideally suited for creating experiences that satisfy the most sophisticated tastes while remaining accessible to newcomers who have not yet developed advanced appreciation for subtle forms of pleasure. These lesser demons possess the ability to perceive the deepest desires of mortals and other creatures, allowing them to provide exactly the right type of stimulation to produce maximum satisfaction in each individual they encounter. The performances staged by Daemonettes combine elements of dance, theater, music, and visual art into unified experiences that engage every sense simultaneously, while telling stories that resonate with the personal histories and secret longings of their audiences. These productions change continuously as they progress, with performers adapting their presentations in real time based on audience reactions to ensure that every moment provides optimal entertainment value. The improvisational skills required for such performances exceed anything achievable by mortal artists, as Daemonettes must maintain perfect coordination with their colleagues while simultaneously monitoring and responding to the emotional states of potentially thousands of spectators. The musical compositions performed during these festivals utilize instruments that exist partially within the warp, allowing them to produce sounds that affect listeners on levels beyond simple auditory stimulation. These performances can induce specific emotional states, trigger particular memories, or create entirely new forms of sensory experience that have no equivalent within normal reality. The musicians who play these instruments undergo training processes that fundamentally alter their relationship with sound and rhythm, enabling them to perceive and manipulate acoustic phenomena that remain invisible to conventional hearing. The endless nature of these celebrations creates environments where participants gradually lose track of time and personal identity, becoming absorbed in cycles of ever-escalating pleasure that make return to normal existence increasingly difficult with each passing moment. The festivals operate according to schedules that deliberately obscure the passage of time, with events flowing seamlessly from one to another without clear beginning or ending points that might allow participants to establish temporal reference points. Visitors to these demon worlds find themselves trapped not through physical restraint, but through psychological mechanisms that make departure seem increasingly undesirable as exposure to enhanced sensations raises their baseline requirements for stimulation to levels that cannot be satisfied within normal environments. The process begins subtly, with experiences that seem only slightly more intense than those available elsewhere, but progresses through stages that culminate in complete dependency on the artificial stimulation provided by the demon world's corrupted environment. The early stages of this entrapment involve exposure to sensory experiences that exceed normal human capacity for pleasure without causing obvious harm or discomfort, creating positive associations that encourage voluntary participation in increasingly intense activities. Visitors during this phase retain their ability to make rational decisions and maintain awareness of their situation, but find themselves reluctant to leave environments that provide such consistent satisfaction of their desires for beauty, comfort, and entertainment. As exposure continues, the neurological changes required to process enhanced sensations begin affecting other aspects of cognitive function, creating alterations in judgment and priority assessment that make the pursuit of pleasure seem more important than previously held goals or responsibilities. Individuals in this stage of corruption begin making decisions based primarily on their potential for generating satisfying experiences, gradually abandoning practical considerations and long-term planning in favor of immediate gratification. The final stages of this transformation result in beings whose entire existence revolves around the consumption of ever more intense sensory experiences, their original personalities subsumed within an overwhelming need for stimulation that can only be satisfied through continued participation in the Daemon Worlds festivals and celebrations. These transformed individuals serve as both cautionary examples and recruitment tools, their obvious contentment and apparent fulfillment attracting new visitors, while demonstrating the ultimate rewards available to those who embrace Slaanesh's gifts completely. The artistic achievements that emerge from these realms represent some of the most technically accomplished and aesthetically sophisticated works ever created, their beauty serving as powerful tools for attracting new victims, while simultaneously providing genuine cultural value that complicates efforts to dismiss Slaaneshi influence as purely destructive. The artists who create these works operate under conditions that would be impossible to replicate elsewhere, with access to materials and techniques that exist only within environments where the normal limitations of physical reality have been suspended or modified. Sculptors working with crystallized emotion create statues that convey feelings directly to observers through mechanisms that bypass normal sensory channels, producing artworks that generate specific emotional responses regardless of the viewer's cultural background or personal preferences. These sculptures serve as focal points for meditation and contemplation, while simultaneously functioning as sophisticated psychological manipulation, devices that influence the mental states of everyone within their presence. Painters use pigments derived from distilled experiences to create images that provide viewers with direct access to the sensations and emotions experienced by their subjects, effectively allowing artworks to serve as windows into other forms of consciousness. The techniques required to work with these materials demand levels of artistic skill that exceed anything achievable by conventional training methods, as artists must learn to manipulate substances that exist partially outside normal space-time while maintaining precise control over their final appearance and emotional impact. The galleries that display these works incorporate viewing environments designed to optimize the impact of each piece, with lighting, acoustics, and spatial arrangements that enhance the artwork's ability to affect observers, while protecting viewers from exposure levels that might prove harmful to those unprepared for intense aesthetic experiences. These spaces serve multiple functions simultaneously, operating as museums, temples, and recruitment centers where appreciation for beauty gradually transforms into worship of the principles that created such magnificent achievements. Musical compositions created within these environments utilize harmonic structures that produce physiological effects beyond simple auditory pleasure, with pieces designed to synchronize listeners' heartbeats, regulate breathing patterns, or induce specific brainwave states that enhance receptivity to further sensory manipulation. The performance spaces for these works incorporate architectural features that amplify and focus sound waves to create acoustic effects impossible within normal concert halls, allowing musicians to achieve levels of emotional impact that approach religious transcendence. The libraries of aesthetic theory that exist within Slaaneshi palaces contain scholarly works that analyze the fundamental principles underlying beauty and pleasure with scientific rigor, creating bodies of knowledge that would revolutionize artistic understanding if they could be studied safely within normal academic environments. These texts explore relationships between sensory input and emotional response with mathematical precision, providing theoretical frameworks for understanding how aesthetic experiences affect consciousness and behavior. The preservation of these cultural achievements presents ongoing challenges for imperial authorities attempting to contain Slaaneshi influence, as the obvious value and beauty of the artworks make simple destruction seem like acts of vandalism rather than necessary public safety measures. The complexity of these pieces often makes it impossible to separate their aesthetic value from their corrupting influence, creating situations where even brief exposure to study their techniques can begin the process of psychological transformation that leads to full corruption. The recruitment methods employed on Slaaneshi Daemon Worlds rely primarily on voluntary participation rather than coercion or deception, as the genuine pleasures and satisfactions available within these environments provide more effective inducements than any form of trickery or force. The initial invitations to visit these realms often come through seemingly innocent channels such as art exhibitions, musical performances, or cultural exchanges that highlight the sophisticated achievements of Slaaneshi artists without revealing their true nature or ultimate consequences. The selection process favors individuals with highly developed aesthetic sensibilities and strong appetites for novel experiences, as these personality traits make subjects more likely to appreciate the subtle pleasures available within Slaaneshi environments, while simultaneously making them more vulnerable to the gradual corruption that extended exposure produces. Artists, musicians, writers, and other creative professionals represent particularly valuable targets due to their ability to serve as conduits for spreading Slaaneshi influence through their work after their return to normal society. The Emperor's Children Traitor Legion maintains several fortress worlds within regions where Slaaneshi influence has created conditions approaching those found on full Daemon Worlds, using these bases to conduct experiments in aesthetic perfection while training new generations of space marines in combat techniques that incorporate elements of artistic expression. These facilities combine traditional military infrastructure with studios and workshops where the pursuit of martial excellence merges with the creation of beautiful and terrible works of art that serve both strategic and cultural functions within the Legion's ongoing campaigns. The Daemon Worlds that exist beyond the direct dominion of the four primary ruinous powers represent some of the most unpredictable and dangerous realms within chaos-controlled space, where competing influences create landscapes of contradictory corruption that shift between different manifestations of demonic power according to patterns that defy conventional understanding. These undivided realms emerge when multiple chaos gods attempt to claim the same territory simultaneously, resulting in worlds where cornate brass citadels rise from Nurglite swamplands, while Tzeentchian crystal formations pierce through Slaaneshi pleasure gardens, creating environments where the fundamental nature of reality changes based on geographical location and the relative strength of competing influences at any given moment. The constant struggle for dominance between different aspects of chaos creates unique challenges for any beings attempting to inhabit or traverse these contested realms. A traveler might begin their journey walking across blood-soaked battlefields where cornate influence holds sway, only to find themselves entering regions where Tzeentchian magic has transformed the landscape into impossible geometries that lead to destinations determined by the observer's subconscious desires rather than physical pathways. These transitions occur without warning or clear boundaries, as the competing powers wage their eternal conflicts through the medium of reality itself, rather than conventional military engagement. The most stable regions within these undivided worlds typically exist around locations where the influences of multiple chaos gods achieve temporary balance, creating zones where different aspects of corruption coexist without immediately destroying each other. These areas often become focal points for settlements and fortifications built by mortal followers who have learned to navigate the complex political and metaphysical dynamics that govern their ever-changing environment. The inhabitants of such settlements must maintain careful neutrality between competing chaos factions while simultaneously demonstrating sufficient devotion to avoid being targeted for destruction by any of the powers they serve. The architecture that emerges within these balanced zones reflects the necessity of accommodating multiple forms of demonic influence simultaneously, with buildings designed to serve the ritual requirements of different chaos gods within the same structure. Temples might feature altars dedicated to Khorne's worship of violence, alongside laboratories where Nurgle's plagues are cultivated, while libraries containing Tzeentchian forbidden knowledge share space with performance halls designed for Slaaneshi celebrations. The construction techniques required for such buildings demand expertise in managing the metaphysical tensions that arise when different aspects of chaos corruption are forced into close proximity. The demon princes who have carved out their own domains within these contested realms represent some of the most powerful and ambitious servants of chaos, beings who have achieved sufficient independence from their patron deities to establish personal fiefdoms that operate according to their own twisted visions, rather than simply serving as extensions of their creator's will. These ascended mortals combine the knowledge and cunning they possessed during their human existence with the supernatural abilities granted by their demonic transformation, creating rulers who understand both the practical requirements of governing mortal populations and the esoteric principles that govern demonic hierarchies. The territories controlled by individual demon princes often reflect the specific obsessions and personality traits that define them during their mortal existence, amplified and distorted by their transformation into creatures of the warp. A demon prince who was once a brilliant military strategist might rule over worlds where every aspect of daily life has been organized according to military principles, with civilian populations living in barrack-style accommodations and following daily routines that mirror army training regimens. Alternatively, a former scholar might create realms where knowledge itself has become a form of currency, with libraries serving as banks and information brokers, wielding political power equivalent to traditional nobility. The methods used by demon princes to maintain control over their domains vary considerably based on their individual capabilities and the specific challenges presented by their territorial holdings. Some rely on traditional displays of supernatural power to intimidate potential challengers, manifesting abilities that demonstrate their mastery over fundamental forces like gravity, time, or the basic structure of matter itself. Others employ more subtle approaches that leverage their understanding of mortal psychology to create systems of governance that make rebellion seem either impossible or undesirable to their subjects. The most successful demon princes develop administrative systems that can function effectively despite the unpredictable nature of their chaos-influenced environments, creating bureaucracies staffed by mortals and lesser demons who have learned to adapt their procedures to accommodate the reality fluctuations and metaphysical anomalies that characterize life within demon worlds. These governmental structures often incorporate elements borrowed from multiple sources, combining imperial administrative techniques with demonic hierarchy principles and innovations developed specifically to address the unique challenges of governing populations that exist in states of ongoing supernatural transformation. Be'lakor the Dark Master represents the most prominent example of a demon prince who has achieved significant independence from the traditional chaos god hierarchy. His status as the first mortal ever elevated to demonic princehood, granting him unique privileges and capabilities that allow him to operate outside the normal constraints that bind other servants of the ruinous powers. His ability to manipulate and corrupt champions of all four chaos gods simultaneously makes him a particularly dangerous adversary, as he can exploit the rivalries and conflicts between different chaos factions to advance his own agenda while avoiding the focused opposition that would result from serving any single patron exclusively. The Shadow Crusades orchestrated by Be'lakor demonstrate how demon princes can leverage their independence to pursue strategic objectives that span multiple star systems and time periods, coordinating complex operations that involve manipulating events across vast distances and extended chronological frameworks. These campaigns rely on Be'lakor's ability to appear anywhere within chaos-controlled space without requiring permission or assistance from the traditional demon hierarchies, allowing him to intervene in conflicts and negotiations at precisely the moments when his involvement will produce maximum disruption to existing power structures. The recruitment methods employed by Be'lakor focus on identifying mortals, whose ambitions and capabilities make them potentially valuable assets, while simultaneously creating psychological vulnerabilities that can be exploited to ensure their eventual corruption and service. His approach typically involves offering genuine assistance and guidance to promising individuals during critical moments in their careers, establishing relationships based on mutual benefit that gradually evolve into dependencies that become increasingly difficult to escape as the recipients of his aid find themselves unable to achieve their goals without his continued support. The fortress worlds controlled by Be'lakor incorporate defensive systems that draw upon his mastery of shadow manipulation and his ability to exist partially outside normal space-time, creating strongholds that can phase in and out of reality to avoid direct assault while simultaneously projecting power into the material universe through mechanisms that bypass conventional military countermeasures. These installations serve multiple functions simultaneously, operating as military bases, research facilities, and recruitment centers where promising mortals undergo transformation processes designed to prepare them for service within Be'lakor's expanding network of agents and allies. The influence of minor chaos entities and obscure warp powers creates additional layers of complexity within Daemon Worlds that exist outside the direct control of the four primary ruinous powers, as these lesser beings attempt to carve out their own spheres of influence within the broader ecosystem of chaos corruption. These entities often represent aspects of mortal experience and emotion that fall outside the traditional domains claimed by Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, creating opportunities for alternative forms of demonic manifestation that can achieve significant power within specific environmental niches. The Daemon Worlds influenced by Malice, the renegade chaos god whose existence remains disputed by imperial scholars, manifest characteristics that actively oppose and undermine the efforts of other chaos powers, rather than simply competing for dominance within shared territories. These realms feature landscapes where the fundamental principles of chaos corruption have been inverted or subverted, creating environments where the normal rules governing demonic influence operate in reverse or produce effects that directly contradict their intended purposes. The followers of Malice who inhabit these contradictory realms exist in states of perpetual internal conflict, their devotion to their patron deity requiring them to oppose all forms of organized authority, including the hierarchical structures that normally govern chaos worship. This creates communities where traditional social organization becomes impossible, as any attempt to establish leadership or coordinated action immediately triggers opposition from other Malice worshippers who view such efforts as betrayals of their god's fundamental nature. The military forces that emerge from Malice-influenced worlds operate according to tactical doctrines that prioritize the disruption and destruction of enemy organization over conventional victory conditions, making them particularly effective against opponents who rely on coordinated strategies and disciplined execution of complex battle plans. These warriors excel at creating chaos within enemy formations through unpredictable attacks and seemingly irrational tactical decisions that force their opponents to abandon careful planning in favor of reactive improvisation. The Sons of Malice Space Marine Warband exemplifies how Malice worship can create military organizations that maintain enough internal cohesion to function as effective fighting forces, while simultaneously embodying the contradictory and self-destructive principles that define their patron deity. These Chaos Space Marines have developed combat techniques that deliberately incorporate elements of friendly fire and self-sabotage, creating tactical approaches that inflict casualties on their own forces while simultaneously maximizing damage to their enemies. The recruitment practices employed by Malice cults focus on individuals who have experienced profound betrayal or abandonment by authority figures, as these psychological wounds create the emotional foundation necessary for embracing a deity whose primary characteristic involves opposition to all forms of organized power. The transformation process involves systematic exposure to situations where trust and cooperation lead to disappointment and failure, gradually conditioning new recruits to view independence and opposition as the only reliable sources of personal security and satisfaction. The demon engines that serve forces aligned with minor chaos powers often incorporate design elements that reflect their creators' attempts to achieve recognition and influence within the broader chaos hierarchy, resulting in war machines that combine proven technological principles with experimental features intended to demonstrate the unique capabilities of their patron entities. These vehicles frequently exhibit performance characteristics that exceed their apparent specifications, as their machine spirits have been enhanced through exposure to warp energies that exist outside the traditional categories recognized by imperial technical doctrine. The worlds touched by entities like the Crow Father or other obscure warp powers develop characteristics that reflect the specific nature and obsessions of their supernatural patrons, creating environments where relatively minor aspects of mortal experience become magnified into dominant features of daily existence. A world influenced by a demon that feeds on curiosity might develop into a realm where the pursuit of knowledge becomes so compulsive that inhabitants abandon all other activities in favor of endless research and exploration, while a planet touched by an entity associated with nostalgia might trap its population in cycles of attempting to recreate idealized versions of past events. The investigation and classification of these minor chaos influences presents ongoing challenges for imperial authorities attempting to understand and counter the full scope of chaos corruption throughout the galaxy. The Ordo Malleus maintains specialized research teams dedicated to studying demon worlds that exhibit characteristics inconsistent with the known patterns of the four primary ruinous powers, but the resources available for such investigations remain limited compared to the vast number of potentially corrupted worlds requiring examination. The strategic implications of demon worlds controlled by minor chaos powers extend beyond their immediate threat to nearby imperial systems to encompass their potential role as testing grounds for new forms of corruption that might eventually be adopted by the major chaos gods. The innovations in demonic influence and reality manipulation that emerge from these experimental realms could provide templates for larger-scale corruption efforts if they prove sufficiently effective at achieving their intended goals. The diplomatic relationships between demon princes, minor chaos entities, and the servants of the four primary ruinous powers create complex webs of alliance and opposition that influence the development of demon worlds throughout chaos-controlled space. These negotiations often involve exchanges of territory, resources, and mortal populations, with agreements that may span centuries or millennia while remaining subject to revision based on changing circumstances and shifting power balances within the broader chaos hierarchy. The transformation of the traitor primarchs into demon princes fundamentally altered not only their physical forms, but also their relationship with real space itself, granting them the ability to reshape entire worlds according to their twisted visions, while serving as focal points for their patron deity's influence within the material universe. These ascended beings possess power that dwarfs even the mightiest demon princes, their connection to both their original legion identities and their demonic patrons, creating unique forms of corruption that blend military precision with supernatural malevolence. The domains they have carved out within the Eye of Terror and other chaos-controlled regions serve as staging grounds for the Long War, while simultaneously functioning as monuments to the specific obsessions and hatreds that drove each Primarch to embrace damnation. Angron's dominion within the Eye of Terror manifests as a collection of worlds transformed into massive gladiatorial complexes, where the concept of peace has been completely eradicated from both physical reality and the consciousness of their inhabitants. These planets feature landscapes carved entirely from brass and bone, with mountain ranges shaped into tiered amphitheaters that can accommodate audiences numbering in the millions, while providing optimal viewing angles for the constant battles that rage across their surfaces. The Red Angel's presence has fundamentally altered the nature of these worlds, creating environments where violence occurs not as a means to achieve specific objectives, but as the primary purpose of existence itself. The arena complexes that dominate these worlds operate on scales that exceed anything constructed during the height of the Great Crusade, with individual fighting pits large enough to accommodate full regiment strength engagements while maintaining the intimate brutality that defines gladiatorial combat. The construction materials consist primarily of compressed bone meal mixed with brass that has been forged in the fires of Khorne's realm, creating surfaces that absorb blood without becoming slippery, while resonating with metallic clangs that enhance the acoustic experience of weapon impacts. The seating arrangements follow architectural principles designed to ensure that every spectator can witness the precise moment when combatants die, with sightlines calculated to maximize the emotional impact of each death upon the demon and mortal audiences that gather to witness these perpetual contests. The gladiators who fight within these arenas include warriors drawn from across the galaxy, ranging from captured Imperial Guard regiments to Chaos Space Marines who have earned the right to participate in these legendary combats through their service to the Blood God. The selection process favors individuals who demonstrate exceptional skill with melee weapons, combined with the psychological resilience necessary to maintain fighting effectiveness, despite the knowledge that their battles serve no strategic purpose beyond entertainment and the generation of violence for its own sake. Many participants undergo physical modifications that enhance their combat capabilities, while ensuring their survival long enough to provide satisfying contests for the audiences that judge their performances. The weapons provided to these gladiators represent some of the finest examples of demon-forged armaments available anywhere within chaos-controlled space, with each blade and axe crafted specifically to maximize the spectacle of combat, while ensuring that fights proceed at optimal paces for audience engagement. These weapons possess limited sentience that allows them to adapt their performance characteristics based on their wielders' skill levels and fighting styles, becoming more responsive and deadly in the hands of experienced warriors, while providing adequate functionality for novice combatants who are still learning the techniques necessary for arena survival. Angron himself participates directly in these contests when the quality of available opponents reaches levels worthy of his personal attention, his massive form dominating the arena floors as he demonstrates the combat techniques that made him legendary among the Primarchs even before his demonic transformation. His fighting style combines the disciplined sword work he learned as a gladiator on Nuceria with the supernatural strength and speed granted by his ascension to demon princehood, creating a display of martial prowess that serves as both entertainment and religious experience for the audiences that witness his performances. The Red Angel's personal arena occupies the central position within the largest of his domain worlds, its dimensions carefully calculated to provide adequate space for his enhanced physical capabilities, while maintaining the confined atmosphere that defines gladiatorial combat. The fighting surface consists of sand mixed with the ground bones of every opponent Angron has personally defeated since his transformation, creating a substrate that carries the psychic resonance of countless deaths, while providing optimal footing for the explosive movements that characterize his combat style. The walls surrounding this arena bear carved records of every significant battle he has fought, with detailed inscriptions that document not only the outcomes, but also the specific techniques and tactical decisions that led to each victory. The audience seating for Angron's personal contests includes positions reserved specifically for other demon princes and greater demons, whose presence enhances the spiritual significance of the combats, while providing expert commentary on the technical aspects of the fighting techniques displayed. These supernatural spectators contribute to the arena's atmosphere through their emotional reactions to particularly impressive displays of skill or violence, their approval or disapproval manifesting as tangible effects that influence the performance of the combatants and the overall energy level of the events. The World Eater's Legion maintains a significant presence throughout Angron's domains, using these gladiatorial worlds as recruitment and training centers, where new generations of berserkers learn to channel their rage into focused combat effectiveness. The Legion's training programs incorporate elements borrowed from traditional gladiatorial schools, combined with techniques developed specifically for enhancing the psychological conditioning that produces effective Khornate warriors. Aspiring World Eaters must prove themselves through participation in arena contests before earning the right to join active combat units, with their performance in these trials determining their initial rank and assignment within the Legion's organizational structure. The medical facilities that support these endless gladiatorial contests operate according to principles that prioritize the rapid healing of non-fatal injuries, while ensuring that combatants retain the scars and battle damage that serve as visible proof of their experience and dedication to Khorne's service. The chirurgeons who staff these facilities combine traditional Space Marine apothecary techniques with demonic healing methods that can restore damaged tissue and bone structure within hours of injury, allowing popular gladiators to participate in multiple contests within short time periods while maintaining the physical condition necessary for peak combat performance. Mortarian's plague-ridden strongholds within the Eye of Terror serve as the primary staging grounds for the Death Guard Legion's ongoing campaigns against Imperial worlds, their diseased environments providing optimal conditions for cultivating new strains of plague while supporting the logistical requirements of large-scale military operations. These fortress worlds feature landscapes completely transformed by Nurgle's influence, with terrain that consists primarily of diseased organic matter that continues to grow and change according to the natural cycles of decay and renewal that define the plague god's domain. The fortifications themselves incorporate living elements that serve defensive functions while simultaneously functioning as laboratories where Death Guard apothecaries develop new biological weapons for deployment against enemy forces. The Plague Planet serves as Mortarian's primary seat of power, its surface covered entirely by interconnected fortress complexes that extend both above and below ground level in configurations designed to maximize defensive capabilities while providing adequate space for the industrial-scale cultivation of disease organisms. The planet's atmosphere consists largely of bacterial colonies that have achieved aerial existence, creating weather patterns where precipitation carries concentrated doses of infection, while wind currents distribute spores according to migration patterns that ensure global coverage of new pathogenic strains. The atmospheric composition provides natural protection against aerial assault while simultaneously serving as a delivery system for biological weapons that can affect enemy forces before they reach the planet's surface. The fortress architecture incorporates design elements that blend traditional Imperial defensive principles with modifications necessary for operating within environments where conventional materials would rapidly succumb to corrosion and decay. The walls consist of specially treated ceramite that has been infected with controlled strains of metal-eating bacteria, creating surfaces that appear to be in states of advanced deterioration, while actually providing enhanced structural integrity through the symbiotic relationship between the construction materials and their bacterial inhabitants. These living walls can repair damage automatically while simultaneously generating new defensive features in response to changing tactical requirements. Mortarian's personal laboratories occupy the deepest levels of the Plague Planet's fortress complexes, their chambers containing equipment that combines traditional scientific instruments with demonic apparatus designed specifically for manipulating biological processes at the molecular level. The Demon Primarch conducts ongoing research into the fundamental nature of disease and decay, developing new plague strains that target specific physiological systems while leaving others intact to ensure optimal transmission rates and maximum suffering among infected populations. His work extends beyond simple biological warfare to encompass the creation of diseases that affect mechanical systems and even abstract concepts like morale and loyalty. The Death Guard Legion's recruitment processes on these plague worlds involve systematic exposure of candidates to increasingly virulent disease strains, with survival serving as the primary qualification for advancement within the Legion's ranks. The transformation procedures combine traditional Space Marine enhancement techniques with controlled infection processes that integrate Nurgle's gifts into the recipient's physiology, creating warriors who possess enhanced resistance to conventional weapons, while gaining the ability to serve as carriers for the plagues they are intended to spread among enemy populations. The industrial facilities that support Death Guard operations produce biological weapons on scales that rival the manufacturing output of major forge worlds, their production lines consisting of vast cultivation chambers where disease cultures multiply under carefully controlled conditions. These facilities operate continuously throughout the planet's rotational cycle, their output distributed throughout the galaxy via plague ships that carry infectious cargoes to target worlds selected according to strategic plans developed by Mortarian's senior commanders. The workers who staff these production facilities exist in states of advanced infection that enhance their productivity while ensuring complete loyalty to Nurgle's cause through the psychological changes that accompany their physical transformation. Fulgrim's palatial worlds within the Eye of Terror represent the ultimate expression of the Emperor's Children Legion's pursuit of perfection through the embrace of Slaaneshi corruption, their landscapes transformed into vast pleasure gardens, where every surface and structure has been designed to provide optimal sensory stimulation, while serving as monuments to the aesthetic achievements possible when artistic vision is freed from conventional moral constraints. These Demon Worlds feature architecture that combines elements borrowed from the greatest civilizations throughout galactic history with innovations that exist only within environments where the normal limitations of physics and engineering have been suspended through supernatural influence. The palaces themselves stretch across entire continents, their rooms and corridors arranged according to principles that prioritize aesthetic impact over practical functionality, while incorporating features that adapt continuously to provide whatever experiences their occupants desire most intensely. The building materials consist primarily of substances that exist in states between matter and pure sensation, creating walls that display colors beyond the normal spectrum of human vision, while generating tactile sensations that respond to the emotional states of anyone who touches them. The architectural spaces flow seamlessly between different environmental themes, with chambers dedicated to specific forms of artistic expression connected by passages that serve as galleries displaying the finest examples of corrupted creativity produced by the Legion's artisan warriors. The Emperor's Children maintain extensive workshops and studios throughout these palatial complexes, their facilities equipped with tools and materials that allow for the creation of artworks that would be impossible to produce within normal real space environments. The Legion's warriors pursue perfection in their chosen artistic disciplines with the same dedication they once applied to military excellence, developing skills that combine traditional techniques with innovations made possible through their enhanced senses and supernatural inspiration. The resulting creations serve both aesthetic and tactical functions, as weapons that achieve perfect balance and beauty, while simultaneously incorporating features that make them devastatingly effective in combat against enemies who lack appreciation for their artistic merit. Fulgrim's personal chambers occupy the central position within the largest of these palatial complexes, their design incorporating elements that reflect his transformation from loyalist primarch to demon prince, while maintaining connections to the cultural achievements that defined his original identity. The Demon Primarch's quarters feature galleries displaying examples of his own artistic work, alongside pieces created by the most talented members of his legion, creating environments where the pursuit of aesthetic perfection serves as both personal obsession and religious devotion to Slaanesh's principles. The recruitment ceremonies conducted within these palatial environments focus on identifying individuals whose aesthetic sensibilities and creative capabilities make them suitable candidates for transformation into Emperor's children, with selection processes that evaluate artistic talent alongside traditional martial qualifications. Promising candidates undergo enhancement procedures that combine standard Space Marine augmentation with modifications designed to heighten sensory perception and artistic inspiration, creating warriors who can appreciate beauty and create art while maintaining the combat effectiveness necessary for service within an active traitor legion. Magnus the Red's sorceress domains on the planet of the sorcerers represent the most extensive collection of arcane knowledge and magical research facilities anywhere within chaos-controlled space. Their libraries and laboratories containing information gathered from across the galaxy's history, along with insights derived from direct observation of warp phenomena that remain invisible to conventional investigation methods. The planet itself exists primarily within the immaterium, while maintaining sufficient connection to real space to support the Thousand Suns Legion's ongoing operations against Imperial forces, creating an environment where the normal distinction between material and psychic reality has been completely dissolved. The great libraries that dominate the planet's surface contain collections that expand continuously as new knowledge manifests on shelves that extend in directions perpendicular to normal space, their archives holding not only records of historical events, but also detailed accounts of possibilities that might occur under different circumstances. The organization of these collections follows systems that account for the fluid nature of information within warp-influenced environments, with cataloging methods that allow researchers to locate specific topics, while acknowledging that the content of individual texts may change based on the reader's intentions and level of understanding. Magnus himself serves as both ruler and chief librarian of these vast repositories, his enhanced psychic abilities allowing him to perceive and manipulate the flow of information throughout his domain, while maintaining awareness of research activities conducted by his subordinates across multiple facilities simultaneously. The Demon Primarch's personal studies focus on understanding the fundamental principles that govern the relationship between knowledge and power, developing theoretical frameworks that explain how information itself can be used as a weapon or tool for reshaping reality according to the wielder's desires. The Thousand Suns Legion maintains extensive research programs throughout these facilities, their sorcerer scholars pursuing investigations into arcane subjects that would be impossible to study safely within normal Imperial environments. The Legion's members have access to source materials and experimental opportunities that allow them to develop magical techniques far beyond anything achievable by conventional psychers, creating capabilities that make them among the most dangerous opponents faced by Imperial forces throughout the galaxy. Their research extends beyond simple spell development to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of existence and the mechanisms that govern reality itself. The fate of human populations trapped on worlds during their transformation into Daemon Worlds represents one of the most horrific aspects of chaos corruption, as entire civilizations find themselves gradually consumed by the very reality they once called home. When the barriers between the materium and immaterium collapse, mortal inhabitants face a choice between death and adaptation to an existence that fundamentally violates everything they understand about the nature of reality. Those who survive the initial stages of transformation discover that their bodies and minds begin changing in response to prolonged exposure to warp energy, with mutations that serve as both survival mechanisms and marks of their growing separation from baseline humanity. The transformation process begins subtly, with minor alterations that might initially be dismissed as stress-related symptoms or environmental effects from the catastrophic events that precipitated their world's corruption. Inhabitants report experiencing vivid dreams that seem more real than waking life, along with enhanced sensory perception that allows them to detect sounds, colors, and textures that were previously imperceptible. These early changes create psychological states that make individuals more receptive to the influence of chaos entities, while simultaneously providing them with capabilities necessary for survival within environments where conventional human senses prove inadequate. As exposure continues, the physical mutations become increasingly pronounced and specialized according to the specific nature of the chaos influence affecting each region. Populations living near areas dominated by Khornate corruption develop enhanced muscle mass and bone density that allows them to participate in the constant warfare that defines their environment, while their nervous systems undergo modifications that reduce their sensitivity to pain and increase their tolerance for violence. These changes occur gradually enough that affected individuals retain their sense of personal identity while adapting to their new capabilities, creating warriors who remember their previous lives while embracing their transformation into instruments of the blood god's will. Inhabitants of regions influenced by Nurgle's corruption undergo different but equally dramatic transformations, with their immune systems becoming hosts to carefully balanced ecosystems of disease organisms that provide enhanced resistance to toxins and environmental hazards, while fundamentally altering their relationship with concepts of health and sickness. These individuals develop the ability to survive in conditions that would prove immediately fatal to unmodified humans, breathing poisonous atmospheres and consuming contaminated food sources, while maintaining enough physical functionality to perform complex tasks and engage in social activities. The psychological adaptations that accompany these physical changes prove equally significant, as transformed populations develop new frameworks for understanding their existence that allow them to find meaning and purpose within environments that would drive unmodified humans to madness or despair. Nurgle's followers learn to perceive beauty in decay and find comfort in the certainty of death, while those touched by Slaanesh discover enhanced appreciation for sensory experiences that transcends their original capacity for pleasure and pain. These altered perspectives serve as coping mechanisms that enable survival while simultaneously deepening the individual's connection to their patron chaos powers. The emergence of chaos cults among these transformed populations occurs naturally as survivors seek explanations for their experiences and guidance for navigating their altered reality. These organizations begin as informal support networks where individuals share information about survival techniques and discuss the philosophical implications of their transformation, but they gradually evolve into structured religious movements with formal hierarchies and established ritual practices. The cult leaders who emerge from these communities typically possess either exceptional charisma or supernatural abilities that mark them as particularly favored by their patron deities. The role of mortal champions within these cult structures becomes crucial for maintaining communication between human followers and the demon entities that increasingly dominate their world's spiritual landscape. These individuals undergo additional transformations that enhance their psychic sensitivity and provide them with abilities necessary for directly interacting with warp entities, serving as translators who can convey the desires and commands of demon lords to mortal populations, while simultaneously representing human concerns and needs to their supernatural masters. The selection process for these champion positions typically involves trials that test candidates' dedication to chaos, while evaluating their capacity for leadership and their resistance to the psychological pressures that accompany direct exposure to demonic influence. Successful candidates receive blessings that manifest as both enhanced abilities and visible marks of their patron's favor, creating individuals who serve as living examples of the rewards available to faithful servants, while simultaneously demonstrating the irreversible nature of the transformation process. The establishment of formal hierarchies that blend demonic and human authority structures creates governance systems uniquely adapted to the challenges of managing populations within demon world environments. These organizations incorporate elements borrowed from imperial administrative traditions, combined with innovations developed specifically to address the supernatural phenomena that affect daily life within chaos-dominated territories. The resulting bureaucracies operate according to principles that account for the fluid nature of reality within their jurisdictions, while maintaining enough stability to support complex social and economic activities. The administrative challenges faced by these hybrid governments include managing populations whose individual capabilities and needs change continuously as their mutations progress, along with coordinating activities across territories where the fundamental laws of physics may operate differently from one region to another. Officials must develop expertise in recognizing the signs of beneficial mutations, while identifying transformations that pose threats to community stability, making decisions about resource allocation and population management that account for supernatural factors alongside traditional concerns about food, shelter, and security. The recruitment of mortal servants by demon princes follows systematic processes designed to identify individuals whose skills and psychological profiles make them suitable for specific roles within the expanding hierarchies that govern demon world societies. These selection procedures evaluate candidates' technical expertise alongside their capacity for adapting to supernatural working conditions, with different positions requiring different combinations of professional competence and resistance to chaos corruption. The most successful recruits demonstrate ability to maintain functional relationships with both human colleagues and demonic supervisors while performing duties that often involve managing resources and personnel that exist partially outside normal reality. The training programs developed for these positions combine traditional educational techniques with exposure protocols designed to gradually acclimate new employees to the psychological and physical demands of their work environment. Trainees learn to operate equipment that incorporates demonic components alongside conventional technology, while developing communication skills necessary for interacting with entities whose thought processes and motivational structures differ fundamentally from human psychology. The curriculum includes practical instruction in recognizing the warning signs of excessive chaos influence, along with techniques for maintaining personal stability while working within environments where reality itself remains subject to constant change. The career advancement opportunities available within these organizations often depend more on an individual's capacity for beneficial mutation than on traditional qualifications like education or experience, creating professional environments where physical and psychological transformation becomes a prerequisite for promotion to positions of greater responsibility. Employees who demonstrate exceptional adaptability to their changing circumstances may find themselves offered roles that require increasingly intimate cooperation with demonic entities, while those who resist transformation often discover their career prospects limited to positions that involve minimal exposure to supernatural influences. The development of new social structures within transformed populations reflects the necessity of accommodating individuals whose capabilities and needs differ dramatically from baseline human norms, while maintaining enough cohesion to support cooperative activities and shared goals. These communities create institutions that serve functions similar to those found in normal human societies, while incorporating features specifically designed to address the unique challenges faced by populations undergoing continuous supernatural transformation. Educational systems within these societies focus on teaching survival skills necessary for existence within demon world environments, alongside traditional academic subjects, with curricula that emphasize adaptability and creative problem-solving over rote memorization of fixed facts and procedures. Students learn to recognize and respond appropriately to different types of demonic entities, while developing the psychological resilience necessary for maintaining personal identity despite ongoing physical and mental changes. The most advanced educational programs prepare graduates for leadership roles within cult hierarchies or positions requiring direct interaction with supernatural entities. The economic systems that emerge within these transformed societies operate according to principles that account for the availability of resources that exist partially within the warp, alongside conventional materials and labor. These economies often incorporate barter systems, where services and goods are exchanged for intangible benefits like protection from hostile demons or access to forbidden knowledge, creating markets where traditional concepts of value and pricing require constant reevaluation based on changing supernatural conditions. The manufacturing capabilities of these communities frequently exceed what would be possible using conventional technology alone, as workers who have undergone beneficial mutations can perform tasks that would normally require specialized equipment while collaborating directly with demon entities whose abilities complement human technical skills. These hybrid production systems create goods that incorporate both material components and supernatural properties, resulting in products that serve practical functions while simultaneously providing spiritual benefits to their users. The military organizations that develop within demon world societies combine traditional human tactical doctrine with techniques specifically designed to take advantage of the supernatural capabilities available to transformed populations. These forces often include units composed entirely of mutated individuals whose enhanced physical abilities make them particularly effective in specific combat roles, alongside formations that integrate human personnel with demon allies in combined arms, approaches that maximize the strengths of both mortal and supernatural combatants. The training regimens used to prepare these military forces emphasize flexibility and adaptation over rigid adherence to established procedures, as combat within demon world environments requires soldiers who can adjust their tactics continuously based on changing battlefield conditions that may include alterations to fundamental physical laws. Veterans of these forces develop expertise in fighting alongside entities whose behavior patterns and capabilities differ dramatically from human norms, learning to coordinate complex operations that involve participants whose individual contributions may be impossible to predict or quantify using conventional military planning methods. The recruitment processes for these military organizations often target individuals who have demonstrated exceptional resilience during their transformation experiences, as the psychological demands of combat within demon world environments exceed even the extreme stresses associated with conventional warfare. Successful candidates typically possess combinations of martial skill and mental flexibility that allow them to function effectively despite constant exposure to phenomena that challenge basic assumptions about reality and causality. The logistic systems that support these military forces operate according to principles that account for the availability of supernatural resources alongside traditional supplies and equipment, with supply chains that may include direct requisitions from demonic entities or the spontaneous manifestation of needed materials through ritual practices. These organizations maintain stockpiles of conventional weapons and ammunition, while simultaneously developing expertise in the use of demon-forged equipment that provides enhanced capabilities at the cost of requiring specialized maintenance and handling procedures. The medical facilities that serve these transformed populations incorporate healing techniques that combine traditional surgical procedures with supernatural methods that can address injuries and conditions that would be impossible to treat using conventional medicine alone. The practitioners who staff these facilities undergo training that prepares them to work with patients whose physiology may differ dramatically from baseline human norms, while developing expertise in recognizing and treating the side effects associated with various forms of beneficial mutation. The Imperial response to Daemon Worlds has evolved considerably since the first encounters with such corrupted realms during the Horus Heresy, when even the most experienced commanders found themselves unprepared for the tactical and strategic challenges posed by worlds where conventional military doctrine proved inadequate or counterproductive. The development of specialized protocols for dealing with these supernatural threats required centuries of bitter experience and catastrophic losses before Imperial forces developed effective methods for containing or destroying realms where the fundamental nature of reality had been compromised beyond redemption. The doctrine of exterminatus represents the most extreme Imperial response to Daemon World threats, employed when all other options have been exhausted or when the level of corruption present makes any attempt at reclamation both impossible and dangerously counterproductive. The decision to authorize the complete destruction of an entire world requires approval from the highest levels of Imperial authority, typically involving consultation between Inquisition representatives, senior military commanders, and Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests, who can provide technical assessments of the feasibility and effectiveness of various destruction methods. The process begins with comprehensive reconnaissance missions designed to evaluate the extent of demonic corruption and identify any strategic resources or populations that might justify attempting less drastic intervention measures. The technical challenges involved in executing exterminatus orders against Daemon Worlds often exceed those encountered when destroying conventional planets, as the supernatural forces that govern these realms can interfere with weapon systems and delivery mechanisms in ways that Imperial engineers struggle to predict or counter. Cyclonic torpedoes launched against heavily corrupted worlds have been observed to detonate prematurely when exposed to concentrated warp energy, while virus bombs designed to eliminate all organic life may prove ineffective against populations that have been transformed beyond the boundaries of conventional biology. The most reliable methods involve sustained bombardment using multiple weapon systems deployed simultaneously from different approach vectors, creating overlapping fields of destruction that prevent demon entities from concentrating their defensive efforts against any single threat. The Siege of Vrax demonstrated both the potential effectiveness and the inherent limitations of Imperial responses to worlds undergoing demonic transformation, as the 88th Siege Army's 17-year campaign to reclaim the Fortress World revealed how conventional military operations could be sustained against chaos forces, while simultaneously highlighting the enormous costs associated with such prolonged engagements. The conflict began as a standard rebellion suppression mission, but gradually evolved into something approaching a war against a nascent Daemon World, as the influence of Khorne and Nurgle began manifesting directly on the battlefield through spontaneous demon incursions and reality distortions that affected everything from weather patterns to ammunition performance. The death corps of Krieg regiments that formed the backbone of the Imperial assault forces proved particularly well-suited for operations against chaos-corrupted enemies due to their psychological conditioning and their acceptance of massive casualties as acceptable costs for achieving strategic objectives. Their willingness to continue fighting despite exposure to supernatural horrors that would break the morale of conventional Imperial Guard units allowed the siege to continue even when demon manifestations began occurring with increasing frequency throughout the later stages of the campaign. The Krieger's expertise in siege warfare techniques provided crucial advantages when dealing with fortifications that had been enhanced through demonic influence, as their methodical approach to reducing enemy strongpoints remained effective even when the targets possessed supernatural defensive capabilities. The involvement of Chaos Space Marine forces from multiple traitor legions transformed the Siege of Vrax from a conventional military operation into a testing ground for Imperial anti-demon tactics and equipment, as the defenders received reinforcements that included World Eaters Berserkers, Death Guard Plague Marines, and Alpha Legion infiltrators, whose presence accelerated the world's corruption while providing the Imperial forces with opportunities to develop counter-strategies against these elite enemies. The siege artillery deployed by the Death Corps proved capable of inflicting significant casualties on Chaos Space Marines when properly concentrated, while the extensive trench networks that characterized Krieg tactical doctrine provided effective defensive positions against demon engine assaults and coordinated infantry attacks. The eventual Imperial victory at Vrax came at enormous cost in both personnel and resources, with casualty figures that exceeded those of many sector-wide campaigns, while requiring the deployment of specialized equipment and personnel that could have been used to address multiple smaller threats elsewhere within the Segmentum Solar. The lessons learned during the siege influenced subsequent Imperial military doctrine regarding anti-chaos operations, particularly in terms of the logistical requirements for sustaining prolonged campaigns against enemies who possessed access to supernatural reinforcement and resupply capabilities that operated outside conventional military limitations. The Grey Knights chapter represents the Imperium's most specialized and effective force for conducting operations against Daemon Worlds and similar supernatural threats, their unique training and equipment providing capabilities that exceed those of conventional Space Marine chapters when dealing with enemies that exist partially or entirely within the warp. The chapter's recruitment and enhancement procedures include extensive psychic conditioning designed to provide resistance against the mental influence exerted by demon entities, while their weapons and armor incorporate blessed materials and sanctified technologies that prove more effective against supernatural opponents than standard Astartes equipment. The Grey Knight's tactical doctrine emphasizes rapid deployment and concentrated firepower, designed to achieve decisive results before demon forces can fully manifest their supernatural capabilities within real space, recognizing that prolonged engagements against such enemies tend to favor the Chaos forces due to their ability to draw reinforcements directly from the warp. Their strike cruisers and battle barges incorporate specialized equipment for detecting and analyzing warp phenomena, allowing the chapter's forces to identify optimal insertion points and timing for their operations, while avoiding areas where demon influence has reached levels that would compromise mission effectiveness. The Nemesis Force weapons wielded by Grey Knights represent some of the most advanced anti-demon technology available to Imperial forces, their psychically attuned materials and construction techniques allowing them to inflict damage on entities that would be immune to conventional weapons, while simultaneously providing enhanced effectiveness against heavily armored opponents. The forging process for these weapons requires the combined expertise of the chapter's tech marines and librarians, creating blades and staves that channel the wielder's psychic energy while maintaining the structural integrity necessary for sustained combat against physically powerful enemies. The Grey Knight's librarian cadre possesses knowledge of anti-demon techniques and protective rituals that surpass even the expertise maintained by other Space Marine chapters' psyker specialists. Their training, including extensive study of demonic hierarchies and behavioral patterns, that allows them to identify optimal strategies for dealing with specific types of warp entities. These specialists can perform banishment rituals that force demon manifestations back into the immaterium, while simultaneously providing psychic support that enhances their battle brothers' resistance to supernatural influence and corruption attempts. The chapter's Terminator squads receive specialized training in close-quarters combat techniques designed specifically for fighting within the confined spaces and reality-distorted environments commonly encountered on Daemon Worlds. their tactical dreadnought armor, providing enhanced protection against both physical attacks and psychic assaults, while mounting weapon systems optimized for engaging multiple demon opponents simultaneously. The psychological conditioning required for Terminator operations includes preparation for combat scenarios where conventional tactical assumptions may prove invalid due to supernatural interference with communications, navigation, and weapon performance. The Ordo Malleus maintains extensive databases documenting the characteristics and defensive capabilities of known demon worlds, providing intelligence resources that allow Imperial commanders to develop mission plans based on detailed knowledge of the specific threats and challenges they will encounter during their operations. These records include tactical assessments compiled from previous engagement reports, alongside theoretical analyses prepared by Inquisition scholars who specialize in studying chaos corruption patterns and demon behavior. The information contained within these archives remains classified at the highest levels of Imperial security, with access restricted to personnel who have undergone extensive loyalty screening and psychic conditioning designed to prevent corruption through exposure to forbidden knowledge. The deployment of Imperial Navy assets against demon worlds requires careful coordination between fleet commanders and Inquisition representatives who can provide guidance on optimal engagement ranges and firing solutions that account for the supernatural defensive measures commonly employed by such targets. Standard Imperial naval doctrine assumes that enemy vessels and installations will behave according to predictable physical laws, but operations against demon worlds often involve targets that can phase in and out of real space or redirect incoming fire through warp-based defensive systems that operate outside conventional tactical parameters. The Adeptus Mechanicus provides crucial technical support for anti-demon world operations through their expertise in developing and maintaining specialized equipment designed to function reliably within environments where conventional technology may malfunction due to warp interference. Tech priests assigned to such missions undergo additional training in recognizing and countering the effects of demonic influence on machine spirits and cogitator systems, while their servo skulls and other autonomous devices receive blessed components and sanctified programming designed to resist corruption attempts by hostile warp entities. The strategic challenges posed by demon worlds extend beyond the immediate tactical difficulties of conducting military operations within reality-distorted environments to encompass broader questions about resource allocation and operational priorities within Imperial defense planning. Each demon world represents a permanent threat that requires ongoing monitoring and containment efforts even when active military intervention proves impossible, creating long-term commitments that strain Imperial resources while providing minimal opportunities for achieving decisive strategic victories that might justify the enormous costs involved. The unpredictable nature of reality on demon worlds forces Imperial commanders to develop tactical approaches that emphasize flexibility and rapid adaptation over detailed advance planning, as mission parameters may change without warning when supernatural influences alter battlefield conditions in ways that invalidate carefully prepared strategies. Communication systems must account for the possibility of psychic interference that can distort or corrupt transmitted information, while navigation equipment requires constant recalibration to compensate for spatial distortions that can cause conventional sensors to provide inaccurate positioning data. The psychological preparation required for personnel assigned to anti-demon world operations includes extensive conditioning designed to maintain operational effectiveness despite exposure to phenomena that challenge basic assumptions about reality and causality. Imperial Guard regiments selected for such missions typically possess exceptional discipline and morale, alongside proven records of performance under extreme stress conditions, while their officers receive specialized training in recognizing the early warning signs of chaos corruption among their subordinates and implementing appropriate countermeasures before such influence can compromise unit effectiveness. The logistical requirements for sustained operations against Daemon Worlds often exceed those of conventional military campaigns due to the need for specialized equipment and consumables that may not be available through standard supply channels. Ammunition blessed by ecclesiarchy priests, protective amulets crafted by sanctioned psychers, and medical supplies designed to treat injuries inflicted by supernatural weapons all require procurement through specialized channels that operate outside normal Adeptus Munitorum procedures, creating supply chain complications that can significantly impact operational planning and execution. The development of new technologies and tactics for combating Daemon World threats continues through ongoing research programs conducted jointly by the Adeptus Mechanicus and various imperial military organizations. Their efforts focused on identifying methods for neutralizing or containing supernatural phenomena that currently exceed imperial capabilities to address effectively. These research initiatives face significant challenges due to the inherent dangers associated with studying chaos corruption directly, as exposure to the subjects under investigation can result in the corruption of research personnel and equipment, along with the potential for catastrophic containment failures that could threaten entire Forge worlds or research facilities. The role of Daemon Worlds as staging grounds for the Long War has become increasingly evident as the galaxy enters its darkest hour, with these corrupted realms serving as both strategic assets and symbolic representations of Chaos's ultimate objectives in its eternal struggle against the Imperium of Man. Unlike conventional military bases that require constant resupply and reinforcement through traditional logistics chains, Daemon Worlds generate their own resources through the fundamental alteration of reality itself, creating self-sustaining platforms for launching attacks against Imperial territory, while simultaneously serving as recruitment centers, where new generations of Chaos followers undergo transformation into effective instruments of the ruinous power's will. The strategic advantages provided by these realms extend far beyond their capacity to support large military formations without requiring external supply lines. The supernatural properties that define Daemon Worlds allow their inhabitants to develop weapons and tactics that operate outside the parameters of conventional warfare, creating asymmetric capabilities that force Imperial commanders to abandon established doctrine in favor of improvised responses to threats they cannot fully understand or predict. When Chaos forces launch invasions from Daemon World staging areas, they bring with them not only enhanced equipment and fanatically devoted personnel, but also the ability to establish beachheads where the fundamental laws governing reality begin to break down in ways that favor their continued operations. The expansion of the Great Rift has fundamentally altered the strategic balance between Chaos and Imperial forces by creating conditions that accelerate Daemon World formation while simultaneously providing enhanced connectivity between existing corrupted realms. The massive warp storm serves as a superhighway that allows Daemon forces to move between distant systems without requiring conventional interstellar travel, enabling coordinated attacks across multiple sectors that would have been impossible to organize using traditional military logistics. This enhanced mobility transforms individual Daemon Worlds from isolated threats into nodes within a vast network of corruption that can project power throughout the galaxy with unprecedented speed and coordination. The Nachmund Gauntlet has become a crucial testing ground for understanding how this expanded network operates in practice, as Imperial forces maintaining the corridor report increasing encounters with Chaos fleets that appear to originate from multiple different Daemon Worlds simultaneously. These combined task forces demonstrate levels of interlegion cooperation that exceed historical precedents, suggesting that the enhanced connectivity provided by the Great Rift has enabled new forms of strategic coordination among chaos factions that previously operated as independent entities pursuing separate agendas. The implications of this development extend beyond immediate military concerns to encompass fundamental questions about the Imperium's long-term viability as a coherent political entity. The traditional imperial strategy of containing chaos corruption through quarantine and gradual reconquest assumes that corrupted worlds remain exceptional cases within a larger framework of stable imperial space. The post-Great Rift galaxy presents a scenario where demon worlds may become common enough to represent a significant percentage of inhabited systems, creating conditions where the Imperium faces not isolated rebellions, but a coordinated alternative civilization that operates according to completely different principles. The theological implications of demon world proliferation pose equally serious challenges to the imperial creed and humanity's understanding of their place within the universe. The existence of realms where the Emperor's protection proves insufficient to maintain the fundamental order of reality raises questions about the scope and limitations of his divine power that imperial doctrine struggles to address without undermining the faith that serves as the foundation for imperial unity. Ecclesiarchy theologians have developed various interpretations that attempt to reconcile the existence of demon worlds with established religious teachings, but these explanations often create more theological problems than they resolve. The most orthodox position maintains that demon worlds represent temporary aberrations that will ultimately be cleansed through the Emperor's eventual return to active leadership of humanity, with their current existence serving as tests of faith that strengthen the resolve of true believers while revealing the weakness of those who lack sufficient devotion. This interpretation preserves the fundamental assumptions of imperial theology while acknowledging the reality of supernatural corruption, but it provides little practical guidance for dealing with the immediate challenges posed by these corrupted realms. Alternative theological frameworks have emerged within certain segments of the imperial hierarchy, particularly among those who have direct experience with demon world phenomena through military service or Inquisition activities. These interpretations often emphasize the role of human choice and moral responsibility in creating conditions that allow chaos corruption to take hold, suggesting that demon worlds represent the inevitable consequences of spiritual failure rather than external impositions of supernatural evil. This perspective places greater emphasis on personal and collective virtue as protective factors while maintaining the Emperor's ultimate authority over the fate of humanity. The philosophical implications of demon world existence extend beyond religious considerations to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of reality and consciousness that challenge basic assumptions underlying imperial civilization. The observation that sentient beings can literally reshape the physical universe through concentrated belief and emotion suggests that the material world possesses far less stability and independence than conventional scientific understanding assumes. This realization has profound implications for fields ranging from engineering and medicine to military strategy and political theory. The Adeptus Mechanicus has struggled to develop theoretical frameworks that can accommodate the reality of demon worlds within their understanding of the universe as a vast machine operating according to discoverable principles. The existence of realms where the Omnissiah's sacred laws of physics cease to operate consistently creates theological crises within the cult Mechanicus that parallel those experienced by the Imperial Creed, forcing tech priests to confront the possibility that their fundamental assumptions about the nature of knowledge and technology may be incomplete or incorrect. Some Forge worlds have responded to these challenges by developing new research programs that attempt to study chaos corruption using scientific methods, hoping to identify underlying principles that might explain supernatural phenomena without abandoning rational inquiry entirely. These efforts face enormous practical difficulties due to the inherent dangers associated with studying chaos directly, along with theological objections from orthodox tech priests who view such research as potential heresy against the Omnissiah's teachings. The potential for new demon worlds to emerge continues to increase as warp storm activity intensifies throughout the galaxy, and traditional methods for maintaining reality's stability prove inadequate against the enhanced levels of psychic trauma and corruption that characterize the current era. The Great Rift's influence extends far beyond its visible boundaries, creating ripple effects that weaken the barriers between dimensions across thousands of star systems, while providing enhanced connectivity that allows chaos influence to spread more rapidly than ever before. Imperial authorities have identified several categories of worlds that appear particularly vulnerable to demonic transformation under current conditions, including planets with large psyker populations, systems that have experienced recent major conflicts, and worlds where traditional imperial authority has been weakened through political instability or economic collapse. The common factor linking these vulnerable locations appears to be the presence of conditions that generate high levels of psychic stress or emotional trauma, creating the psychological resonance that allows warp entities to establish footholds within real space. The development of early warning systems for detecting incipient demon world transformation has become a priority for Imperial intelligence services, with the Ordo Malleus investing significant resources in research programs designed to identify the subtle signs that precede reality breakdown. These efforts have achieved limited success in developing detection methods that can identify corruption in its earliest stages, but the implementation of effective countermeasures remains problematic due to the enormous resources required for intervention and the limited availability of personnel qualified to conduct anti-demon operations. The strategic implications of continued demon world proliferation extend beyond the immediate military threats posed by individual corrupted systems to encompass broader questions about the fundamental sustainability of Imperial civilization in its current form. The Imperium's governing institutions were designed to manage a galaxy where the vast majority of human worlds operated according to predictable physical and social principles, with standardized administrative procedures that assumed basic consistency in environmental conditions and population characteristics across different systems. The increasing prevalence of worlds where these basic assumptions no longer apply creates administrative challenges that exceed the adaptive capacity of existing imperial bureaucracies. Adeptus Munitorum officials struggle to develop supply allocation formulas that account for worlds where conventional resources may be supplemented or replaced by materials generated through supernatural processes, while Adeptus Administratum clerks find their standardized forms and procedures inadequate for documenting the complex reality of governance within partially corrupted systems. The long-term demographic implications of demon world expansion pose equally serious challenges to Imperial strategic planning, as populations that undergo transformation into chaos followers represent permanent losses to the Imperial tax base and recruitment pool, while simultaneously becoming sources of ongoing military threats. The traditional Imperial approach to population management assumes that human settlements will eventually return to Imperial control even after temporary occupation by hostile forces, but demon worlds represent permanent territorial losses that cannot be recovered through conventional reconquest operations. The economic implications of this territorial shrinkage extend beyond simple resource loss to encompass fundamental questions about the Imperium's ability to maintain the industrial capacity necessary for supporting its military forces and civilian population. Many of the worlds that have undergone demonic transformation were significant contributors to sector-level production quotas, with their loss creating supply shortages that ripple throughout entire regions, while forcing surviving worlds to increase their output to compensate for missing capacity. The technological implications of demon world proliferation include both threats and opportunities that Imperial authorities struggle to evaluate properly due to the inherent dangers associated with studying chaos-influenced technology. The weapons and equipment produced on these corrupted worlds often demonstrate capabilities that exceed anything achievable using conventional Imperial manufacturing techniques, suggesting that controlled study of such innovations might provide significant military advantages if conducted safely. However, the risks associated with such research programs include not only the immediate dangers of exposure to chaos corruption, but also the broader theological and political implications of acknowledging that heretical technologies might possess genuine advantages over orthodox Imperial designs. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains strict prohibitions against the study of demon-influenced technology, but increasing pressure from military commanders facing enhanced chaos capabilities has led to quiet research programs that operate outside official oversight. The ultimate fate of the galaxy may well depend on humanity's ability to develop effective responses to the challenge posed by demon world proliferation, while maintaining the unity and spiritual strength that have allowed Imperial civilization to survive for 10 millennia. The current trajectory suggests that without significant changes in Imperial strategy and doctrine, the balance of power between chaos and the Imperium will continue to shift in favor of the ruinous powers as more worlds undergo transformation and the network of corrupted realms expands throughout human space. The emergence of Primarch Roboute Guilliman and the launch of the Indomitus Crusade represent the most significant Imperial response to these challenges in centuries, providing both immediate military capabilities for addressing demon world threats and the potential for broader reforms that might enhance the Imperium's long-term resilience against chaos corruption. However, the scale of the challenges facing humanity suggests that even these extraordinary efforts may prove insufficient without fundamental changes in how Imperial society understands and responds to the supernatural threats that increasingly define the galaxy's future. The eternal war between order and chaos has entered a new phase where the very nature of reality itself has become a battlefield, with demon worlds serving as both weapons and territories in a conflict that transcends conventional military engagement. The outcome of this struggle will determine not only the political future of human civilization, but also the fundamental character of existence within the Milky Way galaxy, as the competing visions of reality embodied by the Imperium and the forces of chaos continue their ancient conflict on scales that dwarf all previous human experience. In this grim darkness of the far future, the demon worlds stand as monuments to humanity's capacity for both transcendence and damnation, representing the ultimate stakes in a war that will determine the fate of consciousness itself within an increasingly hostile universe.